And President-elect Biden, as you mentioned, we've worked closely together on some tough issues. And we've gotten to know each other under some intense and high-pressure situations. And, sir, you can expect that as Secretary of Defense that I will give you the same direct and unvarnished counsel that I did back then. I understand the important role of the Department of Defense and the role that it plays in maintaining stability and deterring aggression and defending and supporting critical alliances around the world, including in the Asia Pacific, in Europe, and around the world. And I fervently believe that, as you've said before, sir, that America is strongest when it works with its allies. And over the years, I've worked hand in hand with our diplomatic colleagues and partners around the globe and witnessed firsthand what we're able to accomplish together. And so, if confirmed, I look forward to resuming this important work. My career has taught me something else equally fundamental to who we are as a nation. When I concluded my military service 4 years ago, I hung up my uniform for the last time and went from being General Lloyd Austin to Lloyd Austin. It is an important distinction and one that I make with utmost seriousness and sincerity. And so I come to this role, this new role, as a civilian leader, with military experience to be sure, but also with a deep appreciation and reverence for the prevailing wisdom of civilian control of our military. I recognize that being a member of the President's cabinet requires a different perspective and unique responsibilities from a career in uniform. And I intend to keep this at the forefront of my mind. And I look forward to surrounding myself with experienced, capable civilian appointees and career civil servants who will enable healthy civil-military relations grounded in meaningful civilian oversight. As Secretary of Defense, my priority will always be the men and women, military and civilian, who make up the department and their families. And I've seen what they're capable of. Great Americans like your son, sir, Bo, and also our future First Lady, Dr. Biden, in her tireless work for military families. As the President-elect said, Bo was one of the military lawyers on my staff in Iraq. And we stayed in touch and saw each other a few times after he returned home. And as you too can attest, Madam Vice President-elect, Bo was a very special person and a true patriot, and a good friend to all who knew him. Over the past 4 decades, I've witnessed our service members and civilians' selflessness and patriotism and the extraordinary lengths that they will go to in support of the mission and in support of one another. And I could not be more proud of them and their families. And if confirmed, it will be the honor of my lifetime to lead them again with honor and integrity. Thank you again, Mr. President-elect and Madam Vice President-elect, for this opportunity and for your trust and confidence in me. May God bless and keep safe all those currently serving in harm's way, and may God continue to bless the United States of America. Thank you.
Good afternoon. President-elect Biden and I will take office at a consequential moment for our country. Even as we work to contain this pandemic and responsibly open our economy, we also need to lead the Defense Department into the future, rebuild and renew global alliances and partnerships, and make sure the United States is prepared to address new threats and new challenges, from cyber to climate. The fundamental responsibility of our administration, and any administration, is keeping the American people safe and secure. My whole career has been about keeping Americans safe. In the United States Senate, I have served on the Homeland Security and Intelligence Committees. I've traveled to Iraq and Afghanistan and the Middle East, where I've seen the extraordinary training, commitment, and heroism of our service members, and proudly represented California, the state with the largest number of active duty military and veterans in our country. And I am absolutely confident that General Lloyd Austin is the right person to lead the Department of Defense at this critical moment. We need a proven leader to help address this pandemic, someone with the experience to help make sure safe and effective vaccines are distributed equitably to all. A leader who will honor the service and sacrifice of those who wear the uniform of the United States, provide for their well-being, and make sure they and their families are treated with the dignity and respect they have earned. And a leader who recognizes that our service members represent America around the world and must uphold our nation's highest values and ideals. General Austin is that leader. As the President-elect noted, this is a milestone nomination. A seasoned, highly decorated, and trailblazing commander, General Austin reflects the very best of our nation. And President-elect Biden and I will work closely with him and our entire team of national security and foreign policy leaders to make sure the United States of America is safer and more secure than ever before. You know, throughout America's history, the United States military has been a home for generations of young men and women dedicated to serving our country. And General Austin is among them. With this nomination, he will continue his service, strengthening not only America's national security, but our role as a partner to allies around the world. And we couldn't be more proud. Thank you.
You're watching News Now from Fox. This is a live look at the Capitol right there, a totally beautiful shot. And we're going to begin our political rundown with today's top headlines. And headlining today is, of course, this event that we were just watching. With just 6 weeks until Inauguration Day, President-elect Joe Biden is rolling out more top-level cabinet picks as he continues filling out his incoming administration with more historic nominations. Fox's Ali Rafa joins us live in Wilmington, Delaware right now with more. Ali, every single day we are hitting you with these new picks. Can you tell us what the latest is today?
Hey, Daytona. Well, with this pick, President-elect Joe Biden is keeping to his promise to form the most diverse cabinet in U.S. history. If confirmed, retired four-star Army General Lloyd Austin will be the first black Secretary of State the country has ever had. Biden said during this event that this pick is personal to him. Austin served as commander of U.S. and coalition forces in Iraq during President Obama's first term in office. But to run the Pentagon, someone has to be a civilian for at least 7 years. Austin retired just 4 years ago. So that means he's going to require a special waiver from Congress to fill this role. And now senators on both sides of the aisle have to decide whether they're going to grant him this, just like they did for retired General James Mattis 4 years ago. Some Democrats even are already saying that they're putting their foot down and saying they're not going to do it. They're not willing to bend the rules. But Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer is already saying that he's backing Biden's pick. And so after today's announcement, that really leaves just one of the top-level cabinet picks left for Biden to announce. That's the pick for Biden's Attorney General. Biden teased that earlier this week, saying we should expect an announcement by the end of the week, Daytona.
Ali, there's been several breaking news stories. Let's talk about Hunter Biden as well, because the Biden transition was even a part of this breaking news. What happened today, and what can we be looking forward to in the future as well?
Yeah, so earlier this evening, the president-elect's son, Hunter Biden, announced that federal prosecutors had opened up an investigation into his taxes. He's saying that he is confident he handled his tax affairs legally and appropriately. But Biden's transition team says that they found out about this investigation that actually started in 2018 just yesterday. Biden himself issuing a statement saying that he's proud of his son and that his son has only emerged stronger out of the past recent months of just endless attacks, personal attacks against him. Now, we know that this probe comes weeks after an election where President Trump and his allies attacked Hunter Biden and the president-elect regarding Hunter Biden and them saying that he used his father's influence to enrich his business affairs. But we're learning, Fox is told by a source familiar with the investigation, that this is not connected to the attacks the Trump campaign and their allies made against Hunter during the campaign. Fox is also being told that Biden himself is not a subject of any investigation. And if you remember last year, then candidate Biden pledged not to interfere with any Justice Department investigation. He also said to let the Justice Department make the judgment about whether someone should be prosecuted. So Daytona, no doubt that all eyes, a lot of attention is going to be on this affair, whether Biden addresses this and what comes next as far as this investigation into Hunter's taxes.
Ali, kind of interesting information coming out from one of our very own reporters, Fox's John Roberts. I'm going to pull up one of his tweets from earlier today. I'm not sure if you saw it or not, but he's saying sources tell Fox News that Biden was made aware of the investigation yesterday. Before then, the investigation was, quote, covert. Sources say DOJ is very sensitive about moving an investigation from covert to overt during an election if it could potentially affect the outcome. I'm curious, what do you think about this tweet, and what is the difference between covert and overt?
Well, Daytona, I'm not familiar with that tweet. I haven't seen it yet. We do know that Fox has reached out to the Department of Justice for comment on this. They have not responded, but you know, we know that during this election, Hunter Biden's affairs was a key topic to President Trump's attacks on the Biden campaign. You know, it was widely said that President Trump had kind of used up all of his attacks on Biden, so he kind of relayed into personal attacks on his son and his family. But we're just going to have to see where this progresses as far as John Roberts' tweet and the president's reaction to this.
Yeah, obviously a long-standing investigation right there that will continue to follow. My last question for you is, what can we expect from President-elect Joe Biden going forward tomorrow?
So we know Biden will receive his daily presidential briefing, and we know that he will be meeting with his transition advisors tomorrow, but we don't expect to see him in public at all. We do know that he teased actually during that event earlier today that his wife, Jill Biden, will actually travel to D.C. to give food boxes to U.S. troops, and one can only imagine that if this is a public event and reporters are there, they will definitely be asking his wife, Jill Biden, about this.
All right, great to hear, and I'm sure we'll be following that story tomorrow here on News Now from Fox. That's Fox's Ali Rafa out there in Wilmington, Delaware. Thank you so much, Ali, for your reporting.
Thank you.
So again, you're watching News Now from Fox. All of these developments coming down with President-elect Biden, and obviously this breaking news coming out today about Hunter Biden and those taxes. Like I said, this is a years-long investigation. I believe it started in 2018, and we will be doing further interviews on what these lawsuits are and what we need to be keeping our eyes on. But speaking of lawsuits, dozens of states and the federal government actually sued Facebook today in twin antitrust lawsuits, alleging that the social media giant has abused its dominance in the digital marketplace and engaged in anti-competitive behavior. If that confuses you, that makes two of us. This is a really interesting situation that's going on with Facebook. Obviously, Facebook in the headlines quite a bit lately. And Andrew Kraft, my fellow co-host here at News Now from Fox, did a really, really great interview with Charlotte Slayman. She is a technology and antitrust expert. She's actually also a former FTC lawyer. So we'll listen in on their conversation that they had just in the past hour or so, and then we'll get to more political headlines as well.
A director of policy at the nonprofit Public Knowledge, focusing on competition. And Charlotte, you know, we're going to speak rather about anti-competition today regarding this lawsuit that 48 attorneys general and the FTC, of which you're a former attorney for, have filed against Facebook. Kind of what is the nature of this lawsuit, and what are they trying to do essentially with Facebook?
Yeah, so the claim is monopolization, that Facebook has been using its market power to maintain an illegal monopoly. The ways that the attorneys general and the FTC claimed that they did that was first through anti-competitive acquisitions, through purchasing companies like Instagram and WhatsApp, and secondarily through withholding interoperability, making it more difficult for competitors to communicate on the Facebook platform.
So essentially, though, what Facebook is responding with is that, you know, the FTC already approved those sales when they were acquired by Facebook. So I guess that would be Facebook's point of view at the moment. How do you respond to that?
So the FTC does not actually approve mergers. The Hart-Scott-Rodino Act requires that companies as large as Facebook and smaller than Facebook as well, but many companies have to submit their merger applications to the Federal Trade Commission in advance so that they have an opportunity to sue if they want to block the merger. But they are not giving a stamp of approval. They are simply deciding whether they want to sue to block or not. The FTC did decide in those cases not to sue to block, but they still have the right to do so now.
I see. And, you know, with Instagram and WhatsApp, you know, millions of Americans use those applications on their mobile devices and what have you. So essentially, if this went the wrong way for Facebook, what could, you know, Americans like you and me be seeing? Could we, you know, could they have to sell off those holdings essentially if it was ruled against them?
It's possible. That is one of the available remedies. There are other ways that the court might try to address the harm that the FTC claims has been going on for 10 years now. But I think the real ultimate goal is for there to be competition against Facebook that consumers can actually access. What's really difficult today is if you want to leave Facebook, you have no way to reach the friends and businesses and institutions that you might be interacting with on Facebook because of the network effects. This means that people who are on Facebook can only communicate with people on Facebook. The key that we need is for competitors to be able to communicate across the network. That way, if a user doesn't like what's happening on Facebook, they can go to a different network and still reach all of those important contacts that they've made on Facebook.
I see. And just, you know, you study this so closely. Were you surprised? I mean, 48 attorneys general. I mean, that's almost the entire country. And from what I understand, this is in conjunction with just a couple, I believe a couple months ago, that the DOJ filed their own lawsuit, antitrust lawsuit, against not only Facebook but Amazon, Google, what have you. So there's this kind of massive effort undertaken right now at the federal level and the state level.
That's right. There's incredible momentum. I think a lot of people are waking up to the huge competitive concerns that we have with what I call dominant digital platforms. That's companies in the position of Facebook, Google, or Amazon, as you suggest, that have this real gatekeeper power for so many other businesses that rely on them and users as well. So the fact that 48 attorneys general throughout the country are a part of this case, and the bipartisan Federal Trade Commission, the Republican chairman, as well as 2 of the Democratic commissioners signed off on this complaint, it really shows that there is a lot of interest. So I'm hopeful that Congress too will take note. They have been doing a lot of in-depth work in this space as well, but showing the bipartisan support for this case today, I think, is a huge step forward for that congressional effort too.
So Charlotte, I'm just kind of curious too, kind of focusing a little bit on the efforts, say Facebook and YouTube have been making to tamp down on misinformation on their platforms in regards to the election and the pending vaccine. When the FTC looks at those efforts, does it kind of take that into consideration, or is it completely separate when they're dealing with, accusations of monopolies and what have you? So is there anything that they would look at to kind of, consider it as a reprieve for these companies, or not really? They're not really related.
So it's largely separate. The way that I do think it's related is that that's one of the policies that might inspire users to try a different social network if they had the capability to do that. So I think that's one of the reasons that actually changing our policies and enforcing antitrust laws to really get some competition here is so important. I think people recognize that there is a lot of misinformation on Facebook. A lot of people are facing harassment on Facebook. Facebook needs to do a better job with content moderation, making sure that they're dealing with that misinformation and harassment. And maybe if there was really competition and consumers felt that they really could leave and go to an alternative social network, Facebook would feel that pressure to do a better job.
So I guess the essence of my question was essentially, like, through those efforts that those social media companies are doing, can they show regulators, at the FTC or attorneys general in court that they're at least trying, or does that not hold up much?
No, I don't think that would be a very strong argument against these antitrust claims.
I see. Kind of like going forward, what are you going to be looking for with these lawsuits, especially at the federal and now the state level? And time and time again, we see the big tech CEOs come and testify in front of the Senate and the House, and they really get reamed. So we won't really be open to that in these court proceedings going forward. But what will you be looking forward to?
So this is an opportunity to have much more in-depth questioning of Facebook executives, including Mark Zuckerberg, who may be deposed as part of this case. But as you say, a lot of that happens behind closed doors. I do think the congressional process is really where our focus ought to be for now. Antitrust lawsuits take a long time. It's possible this case could be going on for years with all of the appeals. It's a very long process. And at the end of that, I'm hopeful that we can have some real changes to how Facebook is operating. But the congressional process has the opportunity to impact the entire sector, all of the powerful digital platforms. So I think that's really where our focus should be, trying to improve the sector as a whole and provide ongoing oversight of this industry.
And just lastly, Charlotte, it kind of seems like there is this broad agreement, especially in government, in the public sector. It's pretty bipartisan from what I understand, kind of everyone versus Facebook, everyone versus either Google or Amazon. There isn't really, you're seeing these fault lines among where people lie and where people fall. Have you seen that as well?
Yes, there is a lot of bipartisan interest in the problems around competition with these platforms. The next step, of course, is identifying what are the tools that we need to provide to a regulator in order to actually remedy some of these problems. So that's the big next step that folks are working on now.
All right, Charlotte Slayman there from Public Knowledge. We thank you so much for joining us here on News Now from Fox. Daytona, back to you.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton went to.
All right, you're watching News Now from Fox. That was a fantastic interview done by our very own Andrew Kraft. When he steps back up here, he will absolutely dive a little bit deeper into that interview. Just a great get. But I want to bring you some other news today as well. Also involving big tech. YouTube will remove videos and content that allege widespread voter fraud in the 2020 presidential election. That's starting on Wednesday, today. Wednesday was the country's safe harbor deadline, or the deadline by which state-level election audits and recounts are supposed to be completed. This is something that YouTube wrote in a Wednesday blog post. I'll read it off for you. Given that, we will start removing any piece of content uploaded today or anytime after that misleads people by alleging that widespread voter fraud or errors change the outcome of the 2020 U.S. presidential election, in line with our approach towards historical U.S. presidential elections. Now, Senator Josh Hawley, who is a Republican out of Missouri, he tweeted this. Google owns YouTube, officially announcing free speech no longer allowed. This is part of what he tweeted. If you have concerns about election integrity, you must sit down and shut up. Repeal Section 230 and break these companies up. Videos claiming President Trump or any other candidate besides President-elect Joe Biden won the 2020 election due to widespread software glitches or counting errors, for example, will be removed starting today. YouTube will allow news covering issues related to the 2020 election, so as long as there is sufficient education, documentary, scientific, or artistic context. That's a part of what this blog also said. Our main goal going into the election season was to make sure we're connecting people with authoritative information while also limiting the reach of misinformation and removing harmful content. The work here is ongoing, and we wanted to provide an update. That's what YouTube was saying. Starting Wednesday, YouTube will update its information panel linking to Google's results panel, which used information from the Associated Press and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency's rumor control page to prevent the spread of false information. The updated panel will link to the Office of the Federal Register's 2020 Electoral College results page. Since November 3rd, YouTube's third-party fact-check panels have appeared more than 200,000 times above search results regarding voter fraud narratives, such as those related to Dominion voting systems. So again, this is coming up on Wednesday. I believe they're saying of next week, but I will double check on that for you. Again, you're watching News Now from Fox. And that was our political rundown. We got a couple other things to hit for you as well. I showed you earlier, but another one of our headlines is these lawsuits going on in Texas as well, with Attorney General Ken Paxton filing alongside several other states as well. So I'm going to play that out for you here on News Now from Fox.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton went directly to the U.S. Supreme Court to challenge elections in 4 states. For perspective on that, we say good morning to constitutional law attorney David Cole from the firm Lynn, Pinker, Hurst, and Schwegman. So compared to a snowball's chance in hell, how much of a chance does Ken Paxton's lawsuit have?
I'd probably bet on the snowball. It's a real uphill climb, because if Texas can sue Wisconsin, Michigan, so on and so forth here, then Vermont can sue Texas about us fracking too much or something like that. It opens up endless possibility, none of it very good. So that basic principle is going to be a real challenge for him. It would be a real, the Supreme Court would have to really, really, really want to expand its original jurisdiction and take on a whole lot more cases.
Right, and we talk about original jurisdiction. You just don't take a lawsuit directly to the United States Supreme Court. And Ken Paxton, I mean, I know that. I'm not a lawyer. He should know that.
I'll give him points for gutsiness there. There is a thing, original jurisdiction. It's designed for disputes between states that can't really be resolved in other courts. For example, Texas and Oklahoma had a running thing back in the 1920s that the Supreme Court resolved about what part of the Red River was our boundary. New York and New Jersey had a lawsuit about 20 years ago about who owned Ellis Island. But aside of that, which happens once, twice a term, you just don't see this kind of thing every day because it's obviously once you take one, you take 1,000.
So the big issue was these several states, all of them won by Joe Biden, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, that sent unsolicited mail-in ballot applications to all voters. Several other states do this. I think there are 5 other states that already do that. No lawsuits against them.
It is a little odd that, well, it's no secret why they want the result to change. If you're concerned about election integrity, you would sue in all these states. And of course, mail-in ballot, there are, I think, 4 states, maybe 5, that only use mail-in ballot for their balloting for their presidential elections. It's a secure form of voting. And there are 30, 40 lawsuits so far about bits and pieces and aspects of this election that have yet to turn up any systemic fraud with the use of mail-in ballots.
As a Texas taxpayer, I mean, am I paying for this lawsuit that any worthwhile attorney thinks has no chance of succeeding? Am I paying for this?
It looks to me from the cover that you are. The Attorney General, of course, gets paid no matter what. It's a state agency, but he appears to have retained a special counsel, which he has the right to do, an outside lawyer to assist, and I assume that person is not working for free. So it does appear, however small it may be in the great scheme of our state's budget, that you are picking up the tab for this lawsuit by Texas.
Okay. Of course, Ken Paxton has been under indictment for 5 years on state securities charges. He is also reported, you know, the FBI never confirms it, reportedly under investigation by the FBI for some federal charges. There is speculation, it is only that he is shopping for a presidential pardon by going to bat for the president's reelection campaign.
Well, it's, you know, there's speculations about all sorts of things these days, but the distinction you make between federal and state charges is just mission critical on that. The president's pardon power does extend to federal crimes. It does not extend to anything that a state may decide to prosecute. So President Trump's ability to perhaps pardon himself would not reach any New York state investigations. Yep. And the same would hold true here with Ken Paxton in the state of Texas.
All right, David Cole, as always, thank you very much.
And as you can see right here, Donald Trump tweeting out saying, wow, at least 17 states have joined Texas in the extraordinary case against the greatest election fraud in the history of the United States. Thank you. We're also getting reports tonight that the president personally asked Republican Senator Ted Cruz of Texas if he would argue a long-shot election lawsuit, this one that we're talking about right now, seeking to overturn the election results in 4 battleground states, should the Supreme Court agree to take it up. This is what sources are saying today. Of course, this is a situation that we will continue to follow here on News Now from Fox, but that is going to do it today for our political rundown as we break down all of the day's top headlines. Join us here on News Now from Fox for all of your nonstop news throughout the day, live, raw, and unfiltered. That's News Now from Fox. Some of you will be going off to a 2-minute commercial break. We'll see you on the other side. All right, you're watching News Now from Fox. That was a great, little breakdown of what our political news was of the day. But my personal favorite story of the day was this SpaceX launch that didn't end quite as we thought it would, and did kind of unfortunately a bit of a failure for SpaceX. But Elon Musk is saying we did exactly what we were supposed to. This is the Starship launch coming out of Texas today. We're going to play it out in its entirety here on News Now from Fox.
We'll see y'all for two.
So what's it about?
So it's about a young woman named Jean whose husband is a criminal, and he disappears one day, and she finds herself on the run with her small child, and meets some unlikely helpers and friends along the way. I don't want to give too much away, but it's a 70s noir-ish crime drama, and I was going to say fun. It's not fun, but it's a really great project.
No, that's awesome. I'm so happy for you. Well, everybody check out I'm Your Woman on December 11th and get The Departed December 30th. You're going to need that one. Both on Amazon Prime Video. We've got WWE superstars, the Bella Twins, in the house when we come back, y'all.
Once weekly Ozempic is helping many people with type 2 diabetes like Emily lower their blood sugar. A majority of adults who took Ozempic reached an A1C under 7 and maintained it. Here's your A1C.
My A1C is under 7.
And you may lose weight. Adults who took Ozempic lost on average up to 12 pounds.
I lost almost 12 pounds.
For those also with known heart disease, Ozempic lowers the risk of major cardiovascular events such as heart attack, stroke, or death.
It lowers the risk.
Oh?
Ozempic is not for people with type 1 diabetes or diabetic ketoacidosis. Do not share needles or pens. Don't reuse needles. Do not take Ozempic if you have a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if you are allergic to Ozempic. Stop taking Ozempic and get medical help right away if you get a lump or swelling in your neck, severe stomach pain, itching, rash, or trouble breathing. Serious side effects may include pancreatitis. Tell your doctor if you have diabetic retinopathy or vision changes. Taking Ozempic with sulfonylurea or insulin may increase low blood sugar risk. Common side effects are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, stomach pain, and constipation. Some side effects can lead to dehydration, which may worsen kidney problems.
Once weekly Ozempic is helping me reach my blood sugar goal.
You may pay as little as $25 for a 1-month or 3-month prescription. Ask your healthcare provider today about once weekly Ozempic.
Your mother is a special lady, and on her special day, you promised her a special celebration. But with slow upload speeds while
how we decided to debut the twins. So this went on from August to November is when the twins last week, literally when the twin, it was 12 years ago. Last week when the twins debuted. So that's how long ago.
They didn't even know it was previous.
No, Freddie like came up with this genius idea that worked for months. And because no social media, no one knew who we were.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is he like a huge, obviously huge Disney fan?
Yeah, that's my thing.
So random.
It's so random,
That's the
right?
randomness of like, I was like, wait, how is Freddie Prinze Jr. fit in? And I thought that was so amazing and very clever, by the way. Did people freak out when all of a sudden there were two of you?
They freaked out. Tell the audience, like, almost didn't know what to do because they're like, this is, wait, what? We planned it perfect where one girl's pulling one twin, like, so her head in her arms, and the other one's pulling the other side, which
this new Netflix movie. It's called Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Check it out.
You're doing my version. That's what Mr. Irvin told me, so it's on the listen game. You let me worry about his own verse. I promise this is like rehearse the wrong version of the song. You're supposed to rehearse what you're going to play. That's the way they talk here.
So that's what I'm saying.
You can't tell me what it is you're going to play. You know, that ain't none of your business. Your business is to pay bills.
I see now. You done got jealous because Mr. Irvin using my version.
What the hell I got to be jealous of you about? If I get jealous of you, I may as well lay down and die.
You understand all that talking to your head, hey, where's the paper? Look at the paper, see what it say. I'm telling you, too busy.
We ain't talking about the paper. We talking about you understanding when you fit in me around here. You play what I say.
I don't care what you play.
Oh, see off two.
And these two have moved, so I have to really up my game
I
tonight.
know. You knew there was A game out
It
there.
was A game out here.
Have you been out looking at women?
I have not, but when I tell you,
Oh my
he has a phenomenal, pretty phenomenal. Absolutely.
Oh, have you met Rachel before? I didn't know.
I know Rachel. Hello, friend. How are you? Good to see you. Good to virtually see you.
That's my favorite part when I'm like, oh, I didn't know that people knew each other. And I'm like, oh, you know each other. This is great. We're all here. Because not everybody gets to know each other. So it's so cool. Well, okay, so cool. When you started Zendaya in Euphoria, is it true that you actually met when she was just a kid?
We did. But I didn't know this until, get this, until it's like second day that I'm working with her last season. And I play her sponsor. And we're talking about having roots in the Bay Area. And she says to me, she says, well, yeah, my mom used to run the box office at California Shakespeare Theater. I said, are you kidding? I used to work there for many years. And she says, oh, man, I remember some show that I used to watch over and over again. I was only like 5 years old. And this guy would show up in a white suit and a motorcycle. And I said, and come and play with the entire audience. And wait, I used to play with the kid because I was always wondering, what was this kid doing out watching a Shakespeare play at like 9 o'clock at night? And it was little Zendaya.
Oh my gosh, I get chills.
Yeah, it's wild.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
basically, I've inspired her entire career. Basically, that's what the story is.
You're welcome, Zendaya.
Basically, you're welcome, Zendaya.
What a random.
Yeah, isn't it wild?
Wow.
And I do wonder if that's just the way the universe works. You know, it's like
And
somehow.
then you both didn't know until the very end of you working together?
Yeah, we didn't even know.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have liftoff. All teams triage alarms. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have liftoff.
So we just wanted to show you that again in case you might have missed it from earlier when it happened live. We showed it to you here on NewsNOW from Fox. Quite a fire explosion. We don't really get to see stuff like that happens live, but glad everyone was okay. There were no injuries, but we showed you earlier as well responses from Elon Musk, the CEO of SpaceX, saying that they got all the data that they needed out of this test prototype. So he's chalking that up as not the failure a lot of people are deeming it. Anyway, I want to just preview an interview we have tomorrow, speaking of space. So wanted to preview that we'll be speaking with one of the astronauts on the Artemis team. Remember, we showed you that event with Vice President Mike Pence speaking at NASA today with the team, the Artemis team of astronauts who are gearing up possibly in the near or distant future to go to Mars, to go to the moon. So you don't want to miss that. We have an exclusive here on NewsNOW Fox with one of those astronauts, those team members of the Artemis team. So that'll be here on NewsNOW from Fox. I want to thank everyone for watching. It's just a few minutes after 8 p.m. here in Phoenix, Arizona Mountain Time, a little after 10 p.m. on the East Coast. We have about 3 more hours of live programming on this Wednesday night. I want to thank everyone for watching. Remember, it's all live and raw and unfiltered here on NewsNOW without bias or opinion, just facts and clarity and context. And we're going to transition to a little more coronavirus news. We know we show you a lot of these press conferences that are happening in cities and states around the country. And so right now we want to go out to the Hoosier State in Indiana, and they had quite a long press conference from today, speaking on the rising case numbers there and the rising hospitalizations. So we're going to listen into that right now on NewsNOW from Fox.
Journalists joining us in the digital press room. If you'd like to ask a question, you can click the raise your hand button. When you are called upon, we will unmute your microphone, and then you will also have to unmute your own microphone.
Weaver will present an update on our vaccination process. We'll also hear from 2 guests representing two of our largest business organizations and associations in the state of Indiana, the State Chamber of Commerce, the president and CEO, Kevin Breniger, and the president of the Indiana Manufacturing Association, Brian Burton. They will join us to give us their perspective on how things are going, 10 months into this together. Also, you'll recall in just a month ago, not even a full month ago, in November, we announced that we were going to be shifting to a more locally driven pandemic requirements-based and reaction regarding the level of positivity and spread, the number of cases per 100,000 residents. And the metrics show, obviously, a county, whether it's in blue, yellow, orange, or red, what that spread is. If it's blue, there's relatively little or a slow spread, and if it's red, it is raging. And just a month later, just to put this in perspectives, we obviously monitor COVID patients, hospital rates, ICU and vent availability. A month later, after we made that announcement, the state of Indiana, when you talk about counties being red, the state of Indiana is on fire. And so just to put this all in context or perspective, every one of our 92 counties is red in terms of one of the ways we measure this, the number of cases per 100,000 residents. Unfortunately, we're now second. We topped that list about a week ago in terms of throughout the nation, a place where we never want to be, and I don't want us to linger in this neighborhood longer than we are. But we have more counties in red for positivity levels this week than we did last week. Our 7-day rolling rate is now at 14% positivity rate. The number of hospitalized COVID patients has risen to over 3,200 people. That's statewide, obviously. Daily admissions are 400, north of 400. And so we're adding every single day on top of that baseline. Our nurses and our doctors, understandably, assistants, are overwhelmed and beyond exhausted. They are trying to recharge their batteries maybe one day a week to go into one of the toughest environments that anyone in our state's history has had to face on a day in, day out basis or endure, all on behalf of trying to make other people better. And so we have got to, our plan and our path forward has got to react to that reality in an effort to preserve hospital intensive care unit capacity and try to lessen that strain and that stress, quite frankly, of our healthcare workers and their ability to provide that care. We will be asking, and not just asking, but directing all of our hospitals to postpone or reschedule, and this is key, all non-emergent, in my terms, urgent or critical inpatient in the hospital setting, which is key, elective procedures that can be safely postponed and or delayed for a 3-week period. This will be concerning December 16th through January 3rd. So we'll obviously be extending the executive order. That probably goes without saying, considering our numbers. But that is nothing I just want to gloss over. This is a directive that I don't take lightly. I understand the impact this will have on our hospital network overall. We have talked to them not just weekly, but daily. You're probably on the phone with a hospital, if not multiple hospitals.
Many times a week.
Many times a week, yeah, and daily, and Dr. Weaver, and Dr. Dan, and Dr. Doss, et cetera, making sure that we are best informed as we make decisions to try to free up and give some relief, quite frankly, to some of our patients. And we know coming off of Thanksgiving and the numbers as they continue, that tide continues to rise. And so what we're trying to project, what does high tide look like, and avoid it. And that comes back to obviously our actions. And so all this is in a single attempt to try to bring down that crest and slow the spread. We're not alone in this, as I've mentioned on this show multiple times. I'm in constant communication, was with 20 plus governors last night, and others have recently gone down this path as well. But let me emphasize to anyone that is watching that if you have a serious medical condition, you should go see your doctor now, and you should make sure that you go to a hospital to get that your inquiry addressed. And if it is emergent, critical, you still should have that procedure done. And so this is only procedures that can be postponed or delayed over this 3-week period, so we can try to clear out some beds, give some relief to our hospital personnel and network. But please don't just seek it, get it, the attention if you need it. I'm also glad, and I just want to touch on for a second, I'm also glad to see more leaders and more individual communities taking actions to help their residents, quite frankly, understand just how widespread the depth and breadth of this virus and how it impacts not just our daily lives, but our routines for sure, but also events that we want to take part in that only roll around once ever so often. Thanksgiving, the holidays that we're cruising into at the tail end of this month and the beginning of next year. And I'm heartened, quite frankly, by the number of leaders around the state who have said, yes, we've got to get through this next few weeks and do all we can. Howard County just recently self-adjusted, according to the color-coded map. They self-adjusted and said, we see where we're going, and we're gonna ratchet up to red, even though we're in the orange category currently right now. And I think that's being proactive. It's not waiting on your numbers to get to where you can see them, the trajectory pointing. But beginning this weekend, again, I said the 16th through the 3rd, beginning this weekend, so we'll have a week lead up for our hospitals to reschedule, et cetera. So it's not just, tomorrow, but beginning this weekend, we will cap all social gatherings at the limit imposed by the county metrics. So we're going to allow individuals or entities to seek permission from their local health departments to host larger events, the social no longer. So I want to stress that this is the cap. This is our state requirement. So social gathering limits are 25 people max if you're in red, 50 people for counties in orange, 100 people if you're in yellow, 250 people in blue counties. We just know when you're balancing the spread and you're balancing a large number of people coming together, and that's where you see this exponential rate, literally as we see it start to spin out of control and management. So we've got an opportunity here to address this, but we're going to have to take steps to do just that. I want nothing more, and we're seeing this play out all across our state, our youngsters to be in class when it's safe to be in class. And we want our K through 12 extracurricular and co-curricular activities to continue, but attendance will be limited to participants, to support personnel, to parents, to guardians, plus their minor children for counties in that red metric, we have to be aware of what color your county is. And so those in blue, yellow, or orange, the limit capacity of 25% in consultation, of course, with your local health department. College and professional venues, sports may continue with participants, support personnel as well, and family members. The local health department obviously is involved in these larger venues and can approve your plan for fan attendance up to 25% capacity. What I have seen in others are these venues have proven that they can do this safely, and so it's a case example of how to do it and do it safely. Understanding that, we have to make sure that we're continuing to wear our masks. We have a mask mandate. Obviously, a lot of other folks do too now, because we just understand how this virus is transmitted. So that will continue to be in effect. Face coverings for all Hoosiers. And I'll just say that, Dr. Box, you're seeing this and all the data that comes in and crunching it, but it all points to one thing, and it's that it's just a trajectory.
It's an exponential rise.
Yeah, and from, November to December, stark difference. And you didn't have a crystal ball, but you were predicting where this could go. And so there's a few things that we know. I wrote up my own little top 10 list, just jotting down, trying to not oversimplify this, but just a list of 10 things that if we do, it will make a positive difference on where we are 1 month from where we sit today. It's obviously limiting the size of your gatherings by following those red, orange, yellow, and blue metrics. That's, again, pausing or delaying those non-emergent elective surgical procedures to free up beds that are done in the inpatient hospital setting. Wear a mask when you're around others. Keep 6 feet apart if you can't be more than, or keep 6 feet apart regardless, but if you can't be, make sure that you have that mask on. Wash your hands throughout the day. Get tested if you're sick or symptomatic. Stay home if you get a positive COVID-19 test result. Isolate yourself so that you're not spreading. Also, something that has becoming more and more effective is the communications, and this is why I'm really looking forward to hearing from Kevin Breniger and Brian Burton, is employers, please talk to your employees. What we see so often is the safest place someone is all day long is at work, but it's what happens outside of work that is then brought back into work that then forces, whether you're a hospital, a factory, or a small business, then it forces people to either isolate or be quarantined. And so all the communication that's being done in our business community is not just appreciated. I think it's essential that folks know just the effect that has, what is going on outside the workplace. Give blood if you're able. We've mentioned that multiple times throughout the last 10 months, never more important than it is now, and I could have said that last month as well, but these, the blood donation shortages are there, and they're real, and many people can help. So if you can, food pantries the same, heading into the holidays. If you're able, please consider that. And then you'll hear more from Dr. Weaver here in just a second after Dr. Box's full report. But stay tuned on the vaccination process. Obviously, this is, you've got the manufacturing part of it, you've got the distribution phase, and then you've got the administration phase, actually putting a shot, or in the first case, shots, plural, in the arm. And so we're going to make sure that we're keeping you updated on a week in, week out basis, but stay tuned to that. And if I could, I know I'm sounding like I'm droning on here and we got a lot to get to, but the fact that we're even talking about a vaccine into this week or next week,
It's incredible.
is a modern medical miracle. I mean, when I checked to see just how long it took for, other vaccines to be developed, approved, and deployed, and it's 4 years for mumps and 7 years for polio and 9 years for measles and 34 years for chickenpox. And we're 10 months into this, and trials completed and soon to be approved, multiple. And so when Dr. Lindsay Weaver gives her report, this is an ever-changing, evolving process, because as production, as supply becomes more, we're able to then obviously pass that on, and we'll do that very efficiently. So with all that, you've probably got your own top 10 list. I just hope I'm on your nice list too.
All I want for Christmas is for Hoosiers to wear their masks, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, Governor. Good afternoon, Hoosiers. The steps being announced today are absolutely necessary as the pandemic tightens its grip on our state. I certainly share your belief that we are in a place that none of us want to be, and I want Hoosiers to look at our color-coded maps in further detail. At the beginning of each week, our 3 color-coded maps come out from our data team. Most people go directly to the 2-metric map and see which counties have changed color or stayed the same. Lately, that has not really mattered because all of our counties have high community spread. We have no counties in blue or yellow and 36 in red. That's more than twice as many as last week, and that clearly shows that this surge is far from over. But I focus a lot personally on the map showing cases per 100,000 residents. This is the 4th consecutive week in which all 92 counties have been in red. I just want to take a minute to remind you about the cutoffs for each of our colors based on this metric of cases per 100,000 Hoosiers. Blue would be less than 10 cases per 100,000 Hoosiers. Yellow, 10 to 99 cases per 100,000 Hoosiers. Orange, 100 to 199 new cases. And red, greater than 200 cases. We do not have a single county below 200 cases per 100,000 residents, and we haven't had one for 4 weeks. In fact, only 2 counties are even below 400 cases per 100,000, and we have 7 counties over 1,000 cases per 100,000 residents. This represents a huge number of infected and sick Hoosiers, all of whom will infect others. The significant community spread of COVID-19 has made it extremely difficult for local public health officials who are trying to provide testing, do contact tracing, and also plan for the arrival of vaccines. So new statewide limits will create consistency across the state at a time when we are all equally affected. It also will allow public health staff to focus on those critical priorities of contact tracing, testing, and vaccination planning. The decision to postpone non-emergent hospital procedures reflects the fact that our hospital systems are stretched to the limit. Our cases continue to rise exponentially, and this is resulting in more hospitalizations. Today, that number was 3,244, which is an 84% increase over our hospitalization rate in November. We also had 480 admitted for COVID or COVID-like symptoms as of November 30th, compared with 225 who were admitted on November 1st. As the governor noted, beds are in short supply in many hospitals, and many have had to redirect patients to other facilities, known as going on diversion, because they don't have the space or the staffing to manage this increasing number of patients. Staffing in hospitals around the holidays is always more difficult, and we know that our healthcare workforce is already exhausted. By postponing non-emergent procedures done in an inpatient setting, we will be able to free up preoperative and postoperative staff and OR staff to be able to provide relief for these weary COVID warriors. We also continue to see an increasing number of deaths, especially among individuals over the age of 80. Many of these Hoosiers are residents of long-term care facilities and represent members of our greatest generation. In the past 2 days alone, we have reported more than 220 deaths due to COVID. In total, 6,207 Hoosiers are confirmed to have died from COVID, and nearly 300 others are considered probable deaths based on their clinical diagnosis. These losses are simply heartbreaking. Every Hoosier has been impacted by COVID-19 this year. We all want life to get back to normal. But to go there, we must continue to use the tools that we have at our disposal. That means wearing a mask, staying home and socially distancing, and most importantly, making those hard choices around holiday gatherings. It also means responding to contact tracers and letting those you've been in close contact with know if you test positive. I want to be clear that we have not abandoned contact tracing. The state is on track to have 1,300 contact tracers in our centralized operation by the end of the year. What we have done is shortened our contact tracing questionnaire in hopes of reaching more people. Those changes are helping tremendously. We compared results from the old, longer script the last week of November to the first week of the shorter script and found that the number of cases interviewed grew by 25% from the prior week. That total inbound and outbound calls at the central contact tracing operation were up 27%. The contact tracers are still having to leave a voicemail many times, so I encourage Hoosiers to answer the call when you see this number, 833-670. I know Hoosiers are tired. I'm tired. But I want to remind you that we are all looking across the water and seeing our destination on the other side. That destination includes being able to worship together, celebrate with our families, tailgate at a football game with our friends, or even be in school or work without the fear of getting this infection. That destination, realistically, though, is still about 6 months away. The vaccine gives us the way forward to reclaiming the lives that we feel like we've lost. But we still have to cross that bridge of time to get there. A bridge built on mask wearing, hand washing, social distancing, and yes, limiting our hospital celebrations to prevent the spread of this disease so that we can have many more years together to celebrate. These mitigation measures can still have profound consequences like saving lives and decreasing prolonged and maybe even permanent health effects. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Dr. Weaver, who will talk about the vaccine and how it will help us to further get to the other side of this pandemic. Lindsay?
Thank you, Dr. Box. Tomorrow, an FDA subcommittee is expected to approve the first COVID-19 vaccine. This approval of the Pfizer vaccine is one of the final steps before the FDA could grant an emergency use authorization that allows a vaccine to be shipped to states. This is incredibly exciting news because it signals the beginning of the end of this pandemic. But as Dr. Box noted, we still have a long journey ahead of us. The first very limited vaccines are expected to arrive in Indiana next week. The initial doses will go to our 5 pilot hospitals, Clark Memorial in Jeffersonville, Deaconess in Evansville, IU Methodist in Indianapolis, Community Hospital in Munster, and Parkview in Fort Wayne. Additional doses are expected to be available at a total of 50 hospitals by the end of next week. Based on our initial allocation, we will receive 55,575 doses of vaccine. These vaccines will go to frontline healthcare workers who are at risk of exposure to COVID-19 while providing direct care to patients. This includes hospital staff and employees of long-term care facilities. We anticipate receiving additional vaccines every week, but we do not know what those amounts will be. We are excited to share that CVS and Walgreens are partnering with us to provide vaccine to our long-term care residents and staff who do not receive it at our hospital sites. Through this partnership, we are assuring our most vulnerable Hoosiers and those that care for them are the first in line for this pandemic or for this vaccination. We expect to remain to focus on our healthcare workforce and our long-term care residents into January. Many people have asked, who is next in line? We have reviewed the recommendations from our national experts in the ethical allocation of COVID-19, including the CDC's ACIP, which is the Advisory Committee of Immunization Practices, who currently lists essential workers next, but will formally vote at a later date. Other national experts recognize the importance of prioritizing vaccinating our vulnerable populations. We recognize that many members of vulnerable populations also are essential workers, so we anticipate that there will be overlap among the groups when we reach the next phase. As we learn more about which vaccines we can expect, the safety and efficacy, and how much we will receive, we will continue to review the national recommendations and rely on the guidance of our statewide multidisciplinary vaccine advisory committee, who continues to meet on a regular basis. At this time, we can't predict when we will move into the next phase, because it will depend, like I said, on vaccine supplies, as well as how many Hoosiers choose to get the vaccine. We continue to hear from people who say they are hesitant to get the vaccine. The biggest concern is safety. We also get questions about how effective it is. It's important to understand how vaccines work. Many vaccines put a weakened or inactivated germ into our bodies, but these vaccines that we will be receiving first are mRNA vaccines, and they take a different approach. They teach our cells how to make a harmless protein called the spike protein that is found on the surface of the virus that causes COVID-19. This protein then triggers an immune response inside our bodies. That immune response produces antibodies to protect us from getting infected if the real virus enters our bodies. These vaccines cannot give someone COVID-19. They do not use live virus. They also don't interact or affect our DNA in any way. While this will be the first mRNA vaccine approved for use, researchers have been studying this and working on these vaccines for decades. One question you might have is, how well will the vaccine work, and how long the vaccine will provide immunity to COVID-19. Trials for both the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are currently reporting them to be 95% effective, meaning that participants who received the vaccine had 95% fewer cases of COVID-19 compared to those who did not receive it. We are several months out from trial participants receiving their second dose of vaccine. Moderna recently reported that participants who received the vaccine continue to show an antibody response 3 months after their second dose. The vaccines will likely provide longer immunity, but how long will be determined as more time passes and the trial participants are monitored. It is important to mention that it is imperative for people who will be getting the vaccine to get the second dose in order to receive the full immunity benefit. I want to emphasize that these vaccines have undergone rigorous testing and review for safety. While I know there were reports of a couple allergic reactions in the United Kingdom, the side effects in general are temporary and have been found to be in line with what we see with other immunizations, such as pain at the injection site, headache, fatigue, and occasionally a low-grade fever. We will review all data that comes with the vaccines and make sure we recommend it for those who it is appropriate. We take similar steps with flu vaccines each year when we ask people about allergic reactions. Some vaccines may not be appropriate for specific individuals, or they may be advised to be monitored for an extended period of time after administration. We have the benefit of the knowledge gained from the hundreds of thousands of people from around the world, from all races and ethnicities, who volunteered for the COVID-19 vaccine trials. The vaccine was found to be equally effective in all of these populations, and the side effects were similar among all groups. I encourage any Hoosier who isn't sure about the vaccine to look at the research behind these vaccines and know that no vaccine is released unless it passes very rigorous testing. As we begin vaccinating our first Hoosiers, I want to extend our gratitude to those selfless individuals whose willingness to help scientists will provide us with our best tool yet to end this pandemic.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. I think we have, Rachel, a video that we're going to, brief video that we're going to share, and then we'll go to Kevin Brenninger and Brian Burton.
The COVID-19 vaccine is now making its way to Indiana, and that means it's time to start planning for your immunization. We know you have a lot of questions about the vaccine and how we plan to distribute it across the state. And right now, our priority is making sure that people who need it most get it first. We'll keep you updated as the situation changes, but for now, here's what we know. Why should I get a vaccine? First of all, we know that everyone should get the vaccine once it is available. These vaccines have been thoroughly tested to ensure that they help protect people from COVID-19. In clinical trials, the vaccines are proven to prevent COVID-19 symptoms in nearly 95% of vaccinated patients. So, we know that these vaccines are safe, and we know that they're effective. Now we need everyone to get vaccinated to help stop the pandemic. The best way to protect yourself, your family, and our community is to get vaccinated as soon as you can. When will I get the vaccine? A few factors will determine when you can get the vaccine. Our distribution timeline will depend on how quickly the vaccine arrives in Indiana, as well as your unique situation. Right now, the vaccine is in limited supply. So we plan to start by vaccinating our healthcare personnel and long-term care residents. Then, depending on our supplies, we will begin vaccinating other at-risk people and critical infrastructure workers. Keep in mind that children under the age of 16 will not be receiving the vaccine at this time because those clinical trials have not been completed. As for everyone else, we ask for your patience. At this time, we hope that everyone will have the opportunity to get vaccinated by next summer. We will keep you updated on our distribution plan as we receive more vaccines, and in the meantime, we'll keep answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Weaver. Again, I recognize that voice. And now we'll go to the president of the Indiana State Chamber of Commerce, and then on to Brian Burton, the president of the Indiana Manufacturers Association. Kevin, you're up first. You've got members in every community in the state of Indiana, and you've heard a lot of, quite frankly, inspirational stories, some of which you've shared with me, about how they've had to make changes and step up their communications like never before. Can you just share your somewhat unique perspective on where we are 10 months into this now?
Certainly. Thank you, Governor, and Dr. Box and Dr. Weaver. We very much appreciate the leadership and the courage that you've shown through this very difficult pandemic, and we support this very necessary and temporary set of orders that you're issuing today. As we look at the employer community in Indiana, many of them are recovering and doing okay. Others are still struggling mightily and hanging on by their thumbnails. And to underscore a point that you made earlier, overwhelmingly people are not getting infected in their place of work. And I can give you an example of that. 3 weeks ago, I spoke to a member of ours who said that they had currently had 46 employees who were infected with the coronavirus, and they had documented that not a single one of them had contracted the virus inside their factory. It was from activities outside of the workplace. And that's why for our part, for the Chamber's part in this effort, we are communicating to employers to strongly encourage them to urge their employees to maintain the same safety protocols that they exercise in the workplace during their activities that are out of the workplace. And it's the things we've heard over and over again. It's wearing masks, it's social distancing, and it's washing your hands and disinfecting and following those same precautions. Because we're not going to get our economy back to full strength, to full operation, until we can knock this virus down. And the recent spikes that we've seen in recent weeks are cause for concern and are frankly cause for justifications for the new restrictions that you're imposing today.
Thank you, Kevin, very much. Brian, we're proud to be the #1 manufacturing state per capita in the country. Advanced manufacturing has helped us weather storms before, and they are indeed this one as well. But as I mentioned to Kevin, your members have had to make tremendous sacrifices and a lot of changes to keep production up. Can you share your perspective as well?
Yes, they have, Governor. And let me thank you for the opportunity to join the briefing today. It's no surprise that the pandemic has significantly impacted manufacturing, which is Indiana's largest industry, employing over 500,000 Hoosiers. Governor, we appreciate your considered approach to seek to balance public health and also economic activity. I also want to applaud the many manufacturers across the state that have stepped up and changed production lines to produce and distribute personal protective equipment and other products for communities in our state. In manufacturing, they focus on safety in the workplace as part of our culture. We use personal protective equipment and safety products, procedures that are built into our industry. But manufacturers are not isolated from the communities we live in. Our workers, associates, team members often travel across cities, counties, and even state boundaries to get to work. Many of our members have multiple facilities within the state. We also have challenges similar to other businesses with employees that are isolated because of exposure, have to care for sick family members, or have to deal with school and childcare limitations. So while we can and have worked to create a safe workplace environment, we need Indiana and our individual communities to be safe. We also have to think about the economy when we emerge from this pandemic, hopefully sometime next year, early next year. If we can work together to get through the next few months, our industry is confident in renewed economic growth in Indiana. We need to look after each other now and enact policies that will spur investment and hiring, like passing a comprehensive COVID liability protection bill that includes those businesses that made PPE, cleaning supplies, and other pandemic-related products. Working together, Indiana manufacturers are poised to keep Indiana the #1 state for manufacturing in America. Governor, our longtime motto has been what Indiana makes makes Indiana. Let me modify that just a little bit for today. What Indiana does today will make Indiana's tomorrow. So it's very important what we do today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Message received. And just to underscore, and Rachel will get right to the Q&A portion. And obviously, Dr. Box and Dr. Weaver will stay with us, but also Mr. Brinegar and Mr. Burton will also be staying with us during the Q&A portion. But Kevin and Brian mentioned two words that kind of stick out. One was temporary. What we do today, this isn't a never-ending exercise. And two, balanced. Everything that we do, we have to make sure there's a healthy balance in terms of our lives and livelihoods. Rachel?
Nikki Kelly with the Fort Wayne Journal-Gazette.
Good afternoon, Nikki.
Good afternoon, Governor. I have a couple quick questions. The first is about on the vaccine discussion. A lot of counties are very concerned about how they're going to afford to be able to do these mass vaccinations. Yep. So I wonder how the state will help them, given the federal money can't be used after January 1. And the second question is, I'm a little confused on the 25 and 50 social gathering limits. It appears that, I guess I don't understand the picking and choosing. So you can't have 75 people at a wedding, but you can have 100 people at a high school football game or basketball game because their parents. Yep. You can go to a Colts game and have thousands, but you can't have 50 people at a funeral. So can you discuss those things, please?
Yep.
How about I take the second one and then Lindsay take the first vaccine?
Okay, take this and then I'll weigh into it. I'll back clean up, but you go first with the second, then Lindsay will go to you for the first, and I'll back clean up.
Okay,
Thanks.
Sounds great. So Nikki, honestly, when we look at this, individual personal gatherings like weddings, funerals, celebrations, parties are the times when people are most likely to be closer, to take off their masks, and more likely to get infected. And oftentimes those are in indoor spaces that really don't lend themselves well to the number of people that are there. And that is why for those procedures, we're going strictly based on whatever the color of your county is, that is the limit on the size. When you look at things like high school football, basketball, you look at things like the professional sports teams, number one, it's still at the discretion of our local public health officers to decide based on where their county is what they're comfortable with, but they cannot decide on anything above 25% of what that particular venue would hold. So that's, even though that can be a larger number of people in, say, the Pacers Arena, there's a lot of entrances coming in and out, a lot of bathrooms, a lot of people spread out, socially distanced and masked.
Lindsay?
Yes, Hal. So about how to afford paying for the vaccine clinics in order to be able to provide it. So the vaccine will be free to all people who receive it. However, places who are giving the vaccine can charge insurance for an administration fee. So that, again, there will never be a charge actually to the patients, but insurances can be billed for the administration fee to help offset that cost. Additionally, we're looking at ways at how we can support our local health departments in their vaccination plans, and we'll continue to monitor and evaluate the situation very carefully, because we do not want that to be a barrier to people to be able to help provide this wonderful service to our community.
Yeah, and I would just add, I mean, you said everything I would have, Dr. Box, in terms of the second question about limits and limitations. And, you know, we take this week by week, day by day, week by week, month by month. We don't, it's a balance, and you don't want to, you want to try to direct your attention on drawing down numbers where you have the most effective shot at actually bringing it down. And so, you know, we look at things that are outdoors and or indoors, and where through tracing we see spread occurring. And Dr. Box just highlighted exactly why we made that decision. And hopefully this will make a difference. And we just understand this comes at a rotten time of the year, because you know, we just asked Hoosiers to celebrate Thanksgiving differently than any other time in our lives, and we saw a little tick down in mobility, but I mean 10 or 15%.
Not as much as we would have liked.
Did not make. I mean, maybe made a dent in it. Who's to say? But not enough to bend that curve. And now we know we're going into the tail end in holidays, where these very events and kids home from school, students home from school, and we're just being real. I mean, we're sharing with you the facts, and we want you to have a lot more Thanksgivings and holidays to celebrate. And so that's why right now, to your point, Nikki, it's fair. I mean, we are picking and choosing. We're trying to do that intelligently, and we're letting the data drive those decisions.
Steve with KPC Media.
Afternoon, Steve.
Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Yourself?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Home on a COVID quarantine myself, so doing my part to stop the spread. Two questions
what
today.
What day of your sentence are you serving?
I am within the first week still, so I still got some time at home with my wife and my son here. So, two questions. The first about vaccines, the other about the hospitalizations that we're seeing. On the vaccine front, I'm wondering whether there's any guidance for people who maybe have been infected before, naturally from picking up the virus and recovered, whether they will be recommended to get a vaccine at some point, or if they'll be pushed down a priority list, to maybe get it later since they may have some immunity going in. And then on the hospitalization front, since the end of November, we've seen total statewide hospitalization numbers tick down a little bit and kind of say stable. They haven't, dropped a lot, but at least they're not increasing on a daily basis at the rate that they had been, prior to that. So I'm wondering if you're seeing some positives in that metric.
Lindsay, do you want to take that first vaccine question, and I'll follow up with the hospitalizations?
Yes, absolutely. So people who have had COVID-19 will be recommended to get the vaccine. In the very beginning now, when we have it's such a scarce resource and we have a finite number, people who have had COVID-19 in the last 90 days and have recovered may be asked to delay a little bit to let those people who are wanting those antibodies to help protect themselves to get to the front of line. But eventually we will ask anybody, whether you've had COVID or not, to go ahead and get the COVID-19 vaccine.
And with regards to hospitalizations, it's great that we've not seen them ticking up significantly. What I will say is that you have to remember it takes a while. There's a lag time, maybe as long as 10 days, 2 weeks before we start to see individuals in the age group that are sick enough that need to be hospitalized. And then they don't just go in one day and come back out, right? They're there for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, sometimes even longer. So it's an additive effect going forward. And that's why it becomes such a long-term burden, and we end up needing to divert patients from one hospital to another. We have staff that is overworked and exhausted.
Yeah, and you would say, Dr. Box, we still haven't seen, you mentioned lag, we still haven't seen what the effect of Thanksgiving. I know it seems like it's in the past, sure, but we don't know right now to the extent of, that's still coming.
Right.
And your point, and I have this discussion a lot throughout the day, people see daily numbers, but it's the additive effect. It's on top of. So while some may be getting out of the discharged, what is the total? And that's why we track that 7-day or 14-day number. Rachel.
Kayla Sullivan, Fox 59.
Afternoon, Kayla.
Good afternoon. Could I get your reaction to the 55,000 doses, that number? Is that something that you are pleased with? Were you wanting more? When might we see a second shipment, and how much? I know you guys had to make that initial request. Was that the initial request, or is this what you're expecting?
It's what we're told, and so therefore, yes, expecting. Did you say happy? No, I'd like to have a lot more, but I understand we're dealing with a set volume or a set approved production, and that's going to be shipped out to all over the country. As I mentioned, I was on the phone last night with multiple governors, and we get it, and that number changes as we've got soon to be, I hope, 2 approved. But then there's 2 shortly thereafter, and they're different. One doesn't require 2 doses. So, I mean, to keep this in perspective as well, I've not shared this with Dr. Box. This is not a medical description, but, with Pfizer or Dr. Weaver, with Pfizer, you're getting, it's like you ordered a pair of shoes and you're getting the left shoe, and you got to wait till the second dose or the second shoe a month later for this to be effective. And so when you mentioned 55,000, that's 55,000 for half of what you need, right? And so yeah, we're looking forward to Moderna, and yeah, we're looking forward to J&J, and yeah, we're looking forward to the others coming online. But again, what I'm pleased about is once we get it here, we have the protocol put in place, and we've practiced. So we're not gonna spill or waste precious life-saving resources when they get here. And I'll be cheering from the cheap seats saying, give us more, give us more, give us more. I'll be greedy about it if I could be. But this is formulaic. Dr. Weaver, you want to clean up anything that I just created?
I think you said it all perfectly. So this first week we know is only going to be Pfizer, and if everything continues to move forward with Moderna, we expect that next week to get Pfizer and Moderna, and for it to be a much bigger amount. We just don't know exactly what that is. So we're only sharing with you what we were allocated, and everything that we're allocated we're going to push out. It is what we are expecting, just based on what we knew that first week was going to look like, and we were going to get our population dose, and we're ready to do it, and we're excited.
Yeah, and would you just say, real quickly, again, you did last week, but in terms of not wasting or spilling, about the saturation rate and being able to move on, so we're not, if we don't go through 55, we will, but if we don't go through 55, how we move that forward?
Right, so we'll be paying very close attention, not only overall for all the sites, but even at the sites. We've asked for them to have people available on hold, ready to get the vaccine in case there's 2 extra doses at the end of the day because people didn't show up, for example. And then on top of that, as we're monitoring that every single day, if we're going to be able to add on more populations once we get to a saturation rate, and we know, okay, we think we have gotten everybody in this group that is wanting and willing to get the vaccine, and we're going to start recruiting more people to come in and get it.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to have to balance too as this unfolds is we have X 100,000 healthcare workers in the state of Indiana. Not all of them are going to say, I want the vaccine.
Right.
And hopefully more folks are encouraged when they see their counterparts getting vaccinated and then not contracting.
Max Lewis, WSBT.
Afternoon, Max.
Good afternoon, Governor. How are you?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thanks. My two questions are probably for Dr. Weaver. They're on the vaccine front. I wanted to know first how the decision was made on those initial hospitals that are getting the vaccine first. I didn't hear any sort of really close to the South Bend, Elkhart metro area, and just wondering about that because, you know, we are one of the big population centers in the state. And then my other question was just about how the state or what the state is doing to help local health departments or help local hospitals, maybe in rural areas, as far as infrastructure that's needed to store the vaccine, distribute it, and if that's, you know, a problem that you've heard of lately.
Sure. So how our first initial 5 hospitals were identified is that they had to have the ultra cold storage because we didn't know if we would have the vaccine.
So we've been listening to for about the last hour here, that update on the coronavirus in Indiana from a public health officials there. So we're going to get out of that. We're going to take a quick commercial break. So stay tuned. We'll see you back here in 2 minutes. And remember, I'm Andrew Kraft, and this is News Now from Fox. It's 9 p.m. here in Phoenix, Arizona, Mountain Time, 11 p.m. on the East Coast, and we hope you're having a great Wednesday night. We're almost to the end of the week here, so we appreciate you watching on News Now, where things are live and raw and unfiltered. We do not offer our opinions or our biases. It's just the facts with some clarity and context attached to the top stories of the day. And the news never stops, not even on the weekends or holidays. And we have you covered here on News Now from Fox. And so in the meantime, for the next couple hours here of our live coverage tonight, we do want to play out some of the great content that we have from our Fox affiliates around the country. They provide News Now really great stories about the coronavirus, the vaccine that's just on the horizon, should be coming within the next few weeks, election 2020 lawsuits, politics going forward, celebrity interviews, and the like. So we're going to play that out for you, just kind of on a loop here. We hope you enjoy it. We're going to start with our sister station in Chicago, Fox 32, and they're going to have a discussion with a doctor about if these vaccines for the coronavirus have any unanticipated or unintended side effects. So let's listen to that.
With significant history of allergic reactions should avoid getting the shot. Let's dig deeper into this. We're joined now by Dr. Jeffrey Copen, the Chief Medical Officer at Northwestern Medicine Lake Forest Hospital. Good to have you back to talk about this, Dr. Copen. So this warning comes as reactions in 2 people who received the vaccine are being investigated. Put this in perspective. Is this a big concern or to be expected with a vaccine?
Yeah, I would say it's to be expected. We know from prior vaccines, there's always a very small group of people that have severe allergic reactions. Now, we don't know a lot about these 2 folks in Britain. We know that they both carried epinephrine pens with them. They both had histories of anaphylactic reactions to other things, but we don't know any other details, so we really have to wait until we find out.
Okay, and this new AP poll finding that only about half of Americans are actually ready to roll up that sleeve and get the vaccine. We just reported those stunning numbers from New York City, where apparently 55% of the fire departments say they won't get the vaccine. What do you feel like is behind this fear?
Yeah, I heard that when you guys reported it. It's the first I heard that about the New York firemen. I hope they change their mind. But let's remember, though, this is all brand new. Only yesterday did our Food and Drug Administration begin to release some of the documents that it has been reviewing. Tomorrow there's going to be a meeting. The expectation is by Friday, the FDA will go ahead and give an emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine. That then will allow the Centers for Disease Control to meet on Friday and Sunday to give us guidance on how to properly administer the vaccine and to whom to give it to in which order. Those directives will then be interpreted by the state here in Illinois, the Illinois Department of Public Health, and then working through the county health departments in the city of Chicago, we'll begin to see the vaccines. So although all that's going to occur over the next 5 days, that's a lot. And we still don't know a lot. What we do know is really from press releases. So we have to wait until FDA is able to give its full report. Once it gives its full report, then we're going to have a lot more to talk about. But the bottom line today is based on the phase 3 results that we do know about, the adverse events that occurred in people who received the Pfizer vaccine was about 0.5%. That's very small. That's not unexpected. That's what we see in other vaccines. So my counsel to everybody right now is let's all keep our patience. Let's follow along as we get more information. And I'm pretty confident that we're going to have a vaccine that's safe and effective, and we all should get it.
Are you going to get it as soon as it's available?
As long as FDA says it's safe and effective, and I hear from some of our vaccinologists at Northwestern who are world experts at this that, yeah, we should get it. I plan to get it as soon as I can. And frankly, I think as a frontline healthcare worker, I'll be getting my first dose of the vaccine probably within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
So yes, I will get it.
We want to talk to you after that happens, okay?
Yeah, have me back, really. This is really important. Yeah. Nobody should make decisions based on rumor, please.
Yes,
we got to look at what the data says.
Thanks,
okay.
Dr. Copen. Perfect weather out there for this fun holiday experience that has returned to Chicago's near north side. Look at these pictures here, from picking out a Christmas tree to snapping that perfect photo for the internet to catching a glimpse of the spectacular light display.
Yeah, they've got it all at Jack Frost Winter Village on Goose Island. Let's go there now. They've also got some new COVID precautions. Beth Bortz joins us live to tell us all about it. It looks beautiful behind you. What can people do when they come to your Winter Village, Beth?
You know, we had to reimagine it this year when we pivoted. We are a small business, but we came up with some great ideas where people can come out, enjoy being outside, and really enjoy the Chicago night. So you come out, you walk through, you can take a Christmas tree, get some great holiday photos. It's absolutely amazing.
What kinds of activities can folks expect to take part in when they come out to Goose Island, Beth?
So when they come out, we're 100% outdoors, and you need to make a reservation because we're following all the safety protocols and keeping everybody socially distant and safe. But when you come out, you can enjoy the lights, and I got to tell you, when the sun goes down and the lights come up here, it's simply magical. It reminds us of all the great things about the holidays, and everyone's taking a lot of photos. We're doing Instagram stuff. We're TikTok. It's absolutely gorgeous out here, and we're still being socially responsible. And everyone 100% outdoors. You need a reservation, but if you come out, you can still really enjoy the holidays. You know, I think everybody needs to get outside and still really have a great time during the season.
As you said, you've had to reimagine things this year, as we've had to reimagine everything. I see you have your mask on. You have to wear that. Reservations only. How else are you making sure that this stays safe?
You know, we're making sure that we only take a certain number of reservations, and they are timed entry, so that we keep everybody socially distant and safe when they come out. You can also select a Christmas tree and take it home. So we've changed the way that people are shopping for Christmas trees. And it's really just a great night out in the city. It's a date night, it's a family event, and it's all socially responsible, which is fantastic. So this year, again, we pivoted, reimagined like lots of small businesses, and we hope everybody comes and has a great time and really enjoys the holiday season.
Beth, before we let you go, let's talk a little logistics. If people want to make those reservations and get there, how do they do that?
They want to go to Welcome to Jack. And, you know, we are the pop-up experts. We bring you Jack's Pumpkin Pop-Up and some events during the summer, and we really want you to come check out Jack's Winter Village.
All right, Beth Boards, thank you so much for joining us. Looks absolutely gorgeous out there and a lot of fun. Happy holidays to you. We appreciate it.
Well, if you haven't bought your Christmas tree yet, you may not get your first choice. Local sellers say it's slim pickings out there already. And we now have just not many days until Christmas at all here, do we? About 16 days to go. So if you don't have one yet, you might not get what you're looking for. Consumer reporter Bonnie Banerjee joining us with the reason. I had to do a double take there. It's really December 9th, isn't it? Wow.
I heard you, you're like, wait a second, how many days? I know, where did this whole year go? It's crazy. and the reasons for this, Chris, they actually range. You might instantly think, okay, pandemic, because that's kind of what's being blamed on everything, right? But this ranges from the California wildfires to, yes, the pandemic, to even just preference of consumers flocking to a certain type of tree over all of the other ones. Fraser firs right now. I actually spoke to a fourth-generation supplier here in Florida today. His name's John Santoni with Great Lakes Christmas Trees. And what he said is that the popularity of the Fraser fir is part of the equation. North Carolina growers had what they call a glut a few years back. Lots and lots of Fraser firs. So other states, they stopped planting as many now. Surprise, guess what? The it tree of the season is the Fraser fir over all these past favorites like the blue spruce or Scots pines. So they're wiped out in many tree farms and stands everywhere in terms of that particular type of tree.
Wow, that is interesting. We have not had in my home a real tree in quite a few years, but I remember the Fraser fir when it was big. It's a nice tree. So what about the pandemic, though? Has it had an effect on the Christmas tree availability out there?
Yeah, you know, primarily in terms of the transport of the trees and the trucking industry on a whole. It's interesting. Some drivers are actually facing restrictions traveling between states like Oregon, for example. Trucks also are being stopped at the border with Canada. And if they're not cleared to come in, those Christmas trees will have to be sold in Canada instead of here. Many independent truckers as well, they've been put out of business by these sort of restrictions, and that in turn is driving up costs for different businesses and consumers.
Makes sense. So there is a strain on the supply, but it's not like you can't find a tree completely out there.
No, you can certainly find a tree still. And the National Christmas Tree Association, they say don't believe all the buzz that you might be hearing about, oh no Christmas trees. They say this is actually the fourth year in a row that they get asked the same question. Is there enough supply to meet demand? And they say the answer's the same. There is adequate supply. It's more about getting the type of tree, the size of tree from the particular vendor that you want. You might have to be a little flexible here. For the previous decade, before 2015, the problem was that they had too many trees and they were all left behind. We're talking by the tens of thousands. So they wanted to change that, and it has changed for the better. What's happened is actually a more accurate supply, but with some of these unexpected hiccups, thank you 2020, the supply chain has been disrupted. From the California wildfires, even the hurricanes, they've had an impact. For example, truckers can actually make more money hauling building supplies for FEMA than something like Christmas trees here to Florida. So if you can stay open-minded on the type of tree, shop around a little bit, you'll certainly be okay. But it's something to keep in mind. You might want to act sooner or later. No last-minute shopping this year.
Yeah, especially if you're looking for one of those Fraser firs. You might have to wait until next year for that one.
You might be out of luck.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sir Bonnie.
I'm there as a Navy fighter pilot who's a bit of a Christmas Grinch, but I'm ordered to go on sort of a mystery find, try to find this old couple from the first ever Tiger Cruise with this reporter who I reluctantly go and kind of fall in love with.
It's a sweet love story, though.
Yeah.
And in real life, you are no Christmas Grinch. In fact, you were able to secure an extra role in that film for a local girl from North Carolina where you were filming. Tell us about that.
I did. Her father was in the military, and she's always so positive and so insightful on social media, and we've communicated a lot. And I know she was going to be close in the area, and so I got her a little guest gig, and she had a great time. And I got screen captures and texts, people who saw her in the movie. when it premiered. So that was pretty cool. So.
That's amazing. I got to see some of the tweets that you two exchanged, and it's wonderful you're able to use that, and really make her year and get her a role in that movie, especially since she does so much good for her father. And let's talk about the quarantine time, because you've stayed in amazing shape. What have you been doing for your at-home workouts to kind of sneak around not having, the usual gym time that we all love?
I'm a big outdoors person too, outdoorsy type. So I just shifted my exercise and workouts to outdoors, and got some of those resistance bands. I built like a little outdoor boxing area. So I've been doing that. There's also like rocks and logs and stuff you can go lift out in the forest. So
that's a very good point.
Just makeshift,
Making the best of it, taking it back to basics.
Yeah. I spent a little over a month, just about 5 weeks up in my hometown of Mammoth Lakes here in California. And it's way up in the mountains, 8,000 to 12,000 feet up in the mountains. And I spent 4 or 5 weeks just hiking and exploring outdoors. So I've just been trying to make the most of my outdoor time, I guess.
I feel you on that. I love going hiking and rock climbing, and it's nice that we have this kind of downtime to experience that. But looking forward to 2021, I know you have the new movie 2 for the Win coming out. Anything else project-wise we can look forward to? 90210 was big for you. What else you got in the works?
Like you mentioned, the 2 for the Win, which will be airing January 16th. I would love to come on back and talk with you a day or two before it airs.
Please come back. I'd love it.
Come back and promote it and remind DC that I'm here.
Long story short, if you've made the switch from name brand products to generic options instead, well, join the club.
People are actively looking for less expensive brands.
And according to a new survey from Inmar Intelligence, that's not all. Get a load of these numbers. Since the start of the pandemic, 61% of shoppers have made the switch to less expensive brands. 80% are actively looking for grocery deals like coupons and promotions, and 92% of shoppers say grocery brands should be doing more to save consumers some cash.
You've seen in the news, the economy's not looking great right now in terms of, unemployment and other things. And I think we're seeing the impact of that.
Shoppers we talked to Tuesday in Bethesda agreed.
I know a lot of people are having trouble feeding their families.
I do most of my shopping in bulk.
I'm often comparing prices in the store to prices that I find online.
So if brands want to hold on to their customers, the folks at Inmar are recommending they dish out more coupons or launch other promotions. Something a lot of shoppers would like to see.
With some of the things we have going on in the world now, it would be a wise move to save money wherever you can.
By the way, we also asked if discount grocery stores were seeing an increase in business right now because of all these trends. Interestingly, that expert said all grocery stores are seeing an increase in business, in part because a lot of people are still stocking up. Guys, back to you.
I'm reading an article that was written by Lindsay Watts with Fox 5 News right now, indicating that, yes, this agency has been aware of this issue for years.
When we broke the story, the head of the Maryland Taxation Department refused an interview, but he had to answer to lawmakers. It's after an audit found the agency was miscalculating the homeowner's tax credit for low-income families and seniors. Auditors say last year, people were shorted nearly $4.5 million, and it's been happening since 2005. We found out the agency was aware of this since 2017, when a Montgomery County man discovered the problem.
We took a deliberative approach to this, and I apologize for that. It probably should have been more alarm bells going off, and let's fix it right away.
Michael Higgs is the director of the Taxation Department. He says the calculation has now been adjusted, but lawmakers pressed him. Why no refunds?
There are tax-paying residents of this state who were, pardon my French, screwed over.
I don't get okay, now that we know that we messed up, tough luck.
is really a bad attitude.
Higgs says lawmakers will have to legislate any refunds. Those efforts are already underway. In fact, I just got this draft. It would refund citizens up to 3 years. In Montgomery County, people impacted could get a few $1,000s.
We all need some good news.
Mary Knight would be among them.
It couldn't come at a better time.
After our first report, she contacted the taxation department asking about a possible refund. The answer was no.
I really didn't give it another thought. So thank you. Thank you for following up on this.
Montgomery County Delegate Al Carr sponsored that legislation we just showed you. He believes it's going to get a hearing soon after the session begins next month. Definitely more to come. For now, back to you.
Well, 2020 has been a pretty tough year for a lot of folks. That is saying that's an understatement for a lot of folks. So really the last thing we need is more negativity in our social media, right? It's in your face all day. There's a way, though, to filter your feeds. And our consumer reporter, Sarbani Banerjee's here. I can't wait to hear how to make our social media feeds a little merrier and brighter, Sarbani.
And it's really easy to do. This isn't about hiding from the world. This is about getting accurate information that keeps you sane, right? Even those social media companies, they have all these different policies to curb hate speech and misinformation. Consumers say they are still seeing it, which is why it is so important to be proactive and take steps yourself. You can actually train your feeds to give you the kind of posts that you want to see. Consumer Reports provided detailed instructions for filtering hate speech, hoaxes, and violence out of your social feeds. Let's start with Facebook, for example. You don't have to unfollow someone altogether. You can snooze them for a little 30-day break by clicking on the 3 dots at the top right of their post. Or you can simply click Hide Post, so Facebook learns what kind of content you don't want to see. Using those same 3 dots, you can also report any abusive content or spam. And then Twitter and Instagram, they have menus on the top right that allow you to do the same sort of things. And the algorithms, they learn and they start showing you things that you prefer.
I love the idea that you're training your feed, you know. What about...
Right, like it's alive.
Yeah, exactly. What about filtering out misinformation?
So it's important to be a proactive consumer. You can essentially crowdsource things that are fake. So what I mean by this is the more of us who take the time to flag something that is not true, the easier a social media company can deal with it and get it taken down. If you see a bogus claim or other inappropriate content, report it, and that'll flag it for these platforms, and it should then go through their review process. It is a way for you to take action against things you don't think should be circulating. Consumer Report says another step you can take to control what you're seeing is really simple. You just sort your feed chronologically instead of how the algorithm thinks it's most likely to get your attention. So you're just going to see things by the time frame that people post.
So you can do that chronologically. I did not know that. Now I do. Okay. Now we know that these social media platforms, that the government federally has been leaning on them to try to prevent misinformation. So how's that going?
You know, it's an uphill battle for sure, because their first line of defense is to simply label something as untrue. And does that really work? Well, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg told U.S. senators that during the election, for example, the company displayed warnings on more than 150 million pieces of content after review by their independent third-party fact checkers. At that same hearing, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey said their company labeled 300,000 tweets during a 2-week period covering election day, and that roughly 3 out of 4 people who saw the tweets only did so after the warning or label was applied. Beyond that, though, they had a little dialogue box that would pop up if users tried to retweet it as well. There's some discussion, though, that maybe that's not even enough. Repeat offenders, those who constantly are getting flagged, should be put on probation where they can't actually post and maybe even ultimately kicked off the platform altogether.
Well, it sounds like we have a little more control than we think, and that's always a good thing, isn't it?
At least in what you see, right?
Exactly.
Perception is reality? I don't know.
Exactly. Thanks, Sarbani.
In Washington, time is running out for Congress to pass a COVID relief bill before the end of the year. And any progress they were making has just hit some troubling snags. Our political editor, Craig Patrick, is here to explain the sticking points and when or if they can be resolved. Hi, Craig.
Hi there, Linda. Bottom line, the Republicans do not want more money to help bail out local and state governments, and Democrats don't want additional legal protections for companies during the pandemic. And those two issues in particular have stalled and conceivably could tank all the progress that was made last week.
We don't have time for lengthy negotiations.
Last week, federal lawmakers and the president said they are on the brink of a bipartisan deal to finally extend pandemic relief.
They're getting very close to a deal.
A deal they said was gaining steam with each passing hour.
We are gaining momentum.
Then as hours turned to days, they pushed back and backed off. The plan bipartisan members of the House and Senate put together has stalled because of Republican and Democratic leadership. Powerful senators like John Cornyn said instead of a bipartisan plan from the rank and file members, they need the four corners to take over. Meaning House Speaker Pelosi, House Minority Leader McCarthy, Senate Minority Leader Schumer, and Majority Leader McConnell. The same four corners that have bickered and failed to deliver a deal for months. And now both sides are up to their old ways of pointing fingers and casting shame.
Shame on Ms. McConnell. Leadership can't wait right now on this $908 billion package.
That $908 billion plan could still come together. It includes three big things that the parties generally agree on. That's $180 billion in extended federal unemployment benefits, $288 billion to help small businesses by offering more low-interest or forgivable loans, and $25 billion in housing assistance. But there are also two big sticking points. Republicans want the deal to include legal protections to prevent companies from being sued for exposing workers or customers to COVID-19. Democrats oppose that. The plan also includes $160 billion to help state and local governments, and Republicans oppose that.
What I recommend is we set aside liability and set aside state and local and pass those things that we can agree on.
Or an alternative plan, put both of those contentious items in, and it would become a bit of a trade-off between the parties, one getting something at once versus something it doesn't, and vice versa. But there's not a whole lot of time to figure that out. Basically 8 or 9 working days at this point. They were targeting December 11th as a goal because they needed that date to be able to keep the government funded. Well, they passed a 1-week extension, which takes us presumably, Linda, either into next week for striking a deal, or if they don't, certainly they would not likely break in that circumstance for Christmas and then try to work through the end of the month because so many pandemic relief programs expire at the end of this year.
Yeah, it's a big deal. So how would Congress pay for these benefits? And is there any chance a deal could include stimulus checks directly to taxpayers?
Yeah, there is no chance of stimulus payments in this short-term deal. There are the prospects of that down the road, perhaps moving into January or beyond. That's something that House Speaker Pelosi supports. It's something President-elect Biden supports. It's something President Trump supports. In fact, the White House just countered with a proposal of $916 billion that does include some stimulus payments to most taxpayers in lieu of the extended payments for unemployment. That's going nowhere in Congress right now. So it's not realistic in the short term, but certainly it's a possibility. In terms of how to pay for all of this, you're talking about $560 billion in unused money from the CARES Act. So the bipartisan lawmakers behind this $908 billion proposal are saying, look, all of it, but $350 billion can be paid for with money that has already been approved, just needs to be reallocated.
All right, Craig Patrick, thank you.
Well, we know the FDA is on the verge of approving the first COVID-19 vaccine, which could happen as soon as tomorrow. So how are local hospitals preparing to receive and distribute these vaccines once they arrive here? We're getting some answers this morning. The doctor's in. Joining us this morning, Dr. Matthew Sims, the Director of Infectious Disease Research for Beaumont Health. Dr. Sims, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, Dina. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. We've been talking about this for quite a while, since the beginning. So let's talk about where we are right now with the vaccine. If it's approved tomorrow, what does that mean to Beaumont? I know that you guys are getting ready to store these Pfizer vaccines at very cold temperatures in special freezers.
Yeah, we're going to be storing it. And we're going to be distributing it to our employees and the other doctors who work at Beaumont. But, in the beginning, we're going to get pretty limited amounts. So, we have entire groups of people looking into the best way to distribute, who should get it first. Given some of the side effects we've heard about, do we have to stagger it? So, We don't give it to like all the ICU at one time and then everybody calls in sick the next day because they feel achy and tired. So there's all sorts of pretty tiny details that go into the decision making of who gets it and when, and who's in that first group and who's in the second group and so on. Beaumont's got something like 38,000 employees and another 5,000 or so doctors and nurse practitioners and PAs who work in our hospitals. It's going to take a while to get all of them.
Is there a statewide or a national distribution plan, or is each hospital system tasked with coming up with a different plan?
Yeah, the states, the national government, the federal government has basically distributed to the states. I believe it's based on population of the state, but I'm not 100% sure on that. And then from there, the state distributes it to the systems that can handle storing this, very difficult to store product. It's not very difficult, but you need these freezers. And then from that point, it's really up to the individual healthcare systems to decide how to distribute it. There's been some talk on the state level among the healthcare systems, as I understand it, but as far as I know, I don't think any particular decision has been made statewide.
So do you have the freezers ready to go? Do you have the vaccine yet? How soon does this all roll out?
Everything's ready to go. The freezers are in place. We have freezers at all of our facilities. But, given all sorts of limitations, we may use one central place to do the vaccination. We may have a couple of places. It's all going to depend on how many we have at a time and what rules we're given about distributing this vaccine, right? So, if they tell us you have to monitor the person for, so much time, we're basing all our numbers on the assumption that we're going to have to watch everybody for about 15 minutes after we give them the vaccine, which is pretty typical. But if they come and say you have to watch them for an hour, that's going to change everything. So until we get the final, wording of the EUA and what we have to do, and, are we going to have to do some blood work with it? What are we going to have to do? We don't know for sure. All the EUAs have had their own sort of rules.
You're saying, what are you saying there, Dr. Sims, the UA?
EUA, the EUA, Emergency Use Authorization.
Gotcha. Let's just talk about when would the general public have their first opportunity to get this vaccine?
We don't know that yet. The first rollouts are going to cover healthcare workers, and they're going to cover long-term care facility residents, because those are the most at-risk people. The next rollouts, the next phase rather, is probably going to go to the higher risk, patients, people who are the most more at risk of getting severe COVID or dying from COVID, and then after, and then it'll go sort of stepwise down the chain from there. But again, those sort of rules are all given to us from above, who we're allowed to give it to at any given time.
I want to get in a viewer question, Dr. Sims.
We don't know yet.
I want to get this question to you. It's important. A viewer question. She says she's had 3 cases of anaphylaxis. Sorry, did you lose my audio? There we go. I'm going to start over. She's had 3 cases of anaphylaxis due to bite stings from the past few years. She's hearing there's been some reactions in the UK to the vaccine. So people who have allergies, we're reading that if you have severe allergies, what does that mean? What kind of allergy? Who has to be worried about this vaccine?
Yeah, so this vaccine is unique. There hasn't been another vaccine quite like it. It's an mRNA vaccine, so it's a piece of mRNA enclosed in a lipid layer. So while people can react to it, we don't know any specific risk for that yet. As they said, there were only 3 cases in a very large number of people. up till this point. We generally, when we give vaccines, have EpiPens and things like that ready in case there is an allergic reaction. And I expect that we're going to have all of that available whenever we're giving the vaccine, just like any other. That being said, anaphylaxis to a vaccine is very rare. And just because you anaphylax to venom, bee venom, doesn't mean you're going to anaphylax to a vaccine.
Doctor, a couple other quick questions, and I know I'm stretching my time here a little bit with you, but if you've already had COVID-19, should you wait to get the vaccine?
Right now, at least at Beaumont, our plan is that if you've had COVID in the last 90 days, we're not going to give the vaccine because you're probably protected and it's a scarce resource. There's probably no risk. You might have some higher side effects, more achiness, more tiredness, because if you already got antibody around, you may react to the vaccine that you're given. That's why that most of the side effects seem to occur on the second dose of the vaccine, because you're probably already reacting.
And how are Beaumont studies going? I know there's other vaccines being studied. So we've got the Pfizer vaccine approval expected for tomorrow. What about these other vaccines?
Sure. Moderna is probably about a week or so behind Pfizer. They submitted already to the FDA. AstraZeneca and J&J are the next two along the line. They're a different type of vaccine. They're what we call a replication deficient adenovirus vaccine, which means instead of using this lipid layer to get the vaccine in, it uses a virus, but just the shell. So that virus can't actually replicate or spread from person to person. Those are a little further behind. Those are still in the middle of their phase 3 trials. Once those phase 3 trials are done, they'll analyze the data, they'll submit to the FDA, and then we'll see. But I expect those are, going to be sort of early next year, probably first quarter. I can't tell you exactly, whether it'll be January or March.
And as an infectious disease expert, you've got to be tremendously impressed by the speed that this is happening.
It's incredible. The average time to generate a brand new vaccine before this has been 10 years. That being said, we have all sorts of new technologies and we're in a pandemic. So it's going faster.
Yes. All right. Dr. Sims, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Oh, you're welcome.
I know you have things to do coming up next hour, though. We are going to talk to another Beaumont doctor who is working the front lines treating patients.
Dr. Skrinsky.
Yep. He is going to bring us his perspective. So ask us a question for the doctor coming up next hour. Hashtag the 9 on Twitter. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk about COVID-19. The doctor's in this morning. The numbers are pretty shocking. According to Johns Hopkins University, 1 in every 22 people has tested positive for COVID-19. That's here in the United States. We're checking in now with Dr. Justin Skrinsky, who oversees the COVID floor at Beaumont Hospital. Doctor, thank you as always for spending time with us. We appreciate it.
Good morning. Pleasure to join.
So we've got some good viewer questions, and I'm going to go ahead and dive right into that after I ask you just one initial question here. Give us the state of the state on the COVID, in your COVID section at Beaumont, or how many patients do you have? How severe is it? Compare it to early in the pandemic.
So it's definitely picking up. And I can tell you right now, it's not quite the level that we saw back in March and April. But the concern that we have is if we extrapolate the numbers, we see where things are going, it's possible for us to run out of capacity very quickly. So kind of tense right now.
And when you say picking up, doctor, are you seeing patients, are they in ICU? Do they have more mild forms of the illness? Are you getting the proper treatment earlier? How sick are these patients?
Right. So right now, we're still seeing the same spectrum of illness that we saw, let's say, back in the spring. Fortunately, over the summer, over the early fall months, we had kind of a reprieve from that where we weren't necessarily seeing the ICU admissions or the intubations so much. But along with the numbers, the sort of severity of cases has come back too. We still have a few treatments which it seems that begun early have good effect. So that's one silver lining. We are getting better outcomes. But if things get overwhelmed, those outcomes get compromised as well.
And who's most at risk from your, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, but when you look at your patients, we know that age is a risk factor, but what else are you seeing?
So it's still the same types of risk factors that we saw before. So elderly patients, patients with chronic illnesses. That said, no one's immune. If you're young, if you're healthy, it's better odds that you'll do well and you won't have serious outcomes. But again, that doesn't exempt you from that. So it's still the mostly target populations we talked about before.
Okay. We have several questions up about testing. So let me go over here to Mike's question. Are you going to test for antibodies before giving the vaccine? Do you know what and I know we just talked to Dr. Sims, and I know there's still a lot of unanswered questions about the protocol, but what do you know about this, doctor?
So right now, sort of as a matter of course, you would not test for antibodies before vaccine. Obviously, that's something you could arrange with one of your providers if you're curious about it. But as sort of standard practice, that would not be part of administering the vaccine. That could be given without antibody testing.
Okay. Is there any benefit in testing after recovery? I'm told you can test positive for up to 90 days. Doesn't that just drive up the positive numbers? We are often wondering about the numbers, doctor. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so that's a pretty layered question right there. In terms of testing after 90 days, the idea of reinfection is still kind of up in the air. It seems that it's very unlikely. So people that are testing positive for weeks or months afterwards, that's likely from their first infection. However, outside of that 90 days, it's unclear, and that really does need some more investigation. In terms of the numbers as a whole, obviously we're seeing these sort of skyrocketing numbers in the community, but then people are saying, well, our hospitalizations are not quite what they were in March and April. Our deaths are not quite what they were in March and April, even though, getting closer. And that has to do with the fact we've built out our testing capacity much more. We are testing more. And it's also in a younger population. That's where we see the demographic skews. So those people tend to do better and tend not to need hospitalization. But if you look at sort of the true markers of how bad things are, hospitalizations very much on the rise, and unfortunately mortality also very much on the rise.
All right. If I have COVID, will it kill it if I get the vaccine?
No. And so right now, the statement from the pharmaceutical companies is that it's believed to be safe to give for patients who have recovered from COVID. Again, that's another area that bears more investigation too. So whether or not that'd be beneficial for people who are more acutely ill. You hear about antibody treatments, synthetic antibodies. So the one that we already have, the bamlanivimab from Eli Lilly, and then you hear about things like Regeneron. Those are the more immediately effective synthetic antibodies. Those are treatments that we're looking into more, and they have sort of more specific applications. But right now, the vaccine would be more just for preventative purposes.
Gotcha. All right, Doctor, we're going to ask you to stick around until after the break, because we got a couple more questions about what area hospitals are seeing specifically with COVID patients. So we'll bring in the gang, and we'll do that right after the break. And we're back now with Dr. Justin Skrinsky, an internal medicine specialist who oversees a COVID floor at Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak. Mariel and Ryan joining us for questions. Elle, why don't you jump in?
Yeah, hey, doctor. Thank you so much for joining us again. I wanted to ask, the governor mentioned that our hospitalization rate is at 79%, but that it was different this time because of folks who live in the rural areas, obviously, would run into some issues there, maybe not being able to have access to the other hospitals. Can you just speak to why it's different this time, even if we don't necessarily see the deaths as quickly as we did with the first surge?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. And honestly, the situation we see in Michigan parallels what we see nationally, which is before we had these really big hotspots. So there were certain areas that were hit especially hard. You think about even the Metro Detroit area got hit really, really hard back in the spring. Now the problem is you can think of that fire, instead of being sort of contained in one area, it's kind of burning statewide. So before you see the more sort of densely populated urban areas, which are also the best served in terms of medical facilities. So that's where your big hospitals are, your academic centers. But now when you see that spread out to the rural communities, you're getting situations where you have smaller hospital systems, let's say even in the northern part of the state, which aren't used to those kinds of volumes, very easy to overwhelm them.
Doctor, early on in the pandemic, you know, there was, I don't want to say a prototype, but you know, the elderly, if you had diabetes, prior health condition, that was a candidate to be hospitalized. Are you seeing something similar now? As you look, you know, on an ICU floor, on a COVID floor, is there a prototype for somebody who is hospitalized right now? Or is it just anybody and everybody?
Well, the short answer is it's everybody. But, you know, we still see those numbers skewed towards the more at-risk populations that you mentioned. So you still see that skewed more towards the elderly, the chronically ill. And honestly, those are the people that we're most vigilant about. So we are seeing a good amount of young people as well. And unfortunately, we do see some of those people progress to things like intubation or even worse. So again, that's a really important message, is that really no one is exempt from this. No one's immune from this. You can play the numbers and say, okay, well, I'm in a low risk group, but that doesn't guarantee that you're safe. So if you look at the patients that have the worst outcomes, yes, it's still those sort of elderly and more chronically ill patients.
Doctor, when you interact with these patients, I'm not sure, and there's probably not a lot of time for chit chat, but are they aware of how they got the virus?
You know, honestly, it's a very mixed bag. Some people, they'll have a definite contact, and they'll say, okay, well, I was at a gathering or I was exposed at work, whatever it might be. But you know, and I think that's the majority of people. But still, a lot of people, you know, they're doing things right. And there's no obvious source of this, and they're still getting sick, and that really brings up a lot of issues that we've been getting into in this, you know, on a statewide level in the past couple of weeks, where we're thinking about, okay, well, how safe is things like indoor dining? How safe are these enclosed spaces? Even if we're able to distance, even if we're able to wear masks, how safe is it really for us to be indoors together? And that's a really critical question, especially getting into the holidays.
Yeah, it sure is. Dr. Justin Skrinsky, thank you so much, as always, for bringing us your perspective.
Always my pleasure to join.
Thank you.
Well, families continue to juggle and to struggle with school and what we're experiencing now. And the writer of the book that inspired the movie, Mean Girls, has co-authored a guide to help parents survive and also help their children thrive in virtual and hybrid learning. Rosalind Wiseman joins us live to talk about the distance learning playbook for parents. And who would have ever thought this would have come in so useful right now? Rosalind, good morning. It's so good to have you with us.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everybody who is trying to save children and take them to school right now in the best possible way.
Sure. It's a struggle. The bottom line, too, is I think what makes it harder for so many people, Rosalind, is that there's no real end in sight, but you've come up with ways to help parents. So let's start with this: 5 tips for distance learning success. One of the things that you say, your first point, is that you don't have to be your child's teacher. And I think that's something that a lot of parents really need to keep in mind.
Absolutely, because you are your child's teacher throughout their lives, but in academics, we really are partners with teachers when they are teaching the subject matter experts, the subjects that they are expert at, and so math and science and language and social studies. So we are behind the scenes guiding through the process. Now, I know it might not feel like that right now because we're watching them do Zoom classes and we feel more active in the classes, but we really are behind the scenes guiding them through the process.
Well, and it seems like that should be a burden off of a lot of people's shoulders, too, to think of it and to kind of frame it that way, that you are not, in fact, the teacher. I think that could help a lot of parents out. Another thing that you say, Rosalind, is that you don't have to handle everything well all the time. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, when did we ever handle everything well all the time?
True.
I mean, we might have pretended when we posted on like Instagram or Facebook that our families were perfect and that our kids, but we always got along with our children. But we never were, nothing was ever perfect. Everything is always messy. If there's one thing parenting teaches you, things are messy. So, and things are really messy right now. And so the thing that I really want people to realize is that if we're feeling anxious, and certainly in December, after all of these months of distance distance learning, and maybe your child went from like hybrid or going to school more often, and then now they're back to all virtual, and you really understandably could just be at your wit's end, and also seeing your child really get so frustrated. And so one of the things I want us to really remember is two things. One is emotions are not permanent. I mean, they're real. They're absolutely real in the moment, but they're not permanent. So if we can think about that, it's actually easier to let go of them and to have them process into a better, more productive emotion. And then the other part is that it's really important to self-regulate and to learn how to understand your emotions overall so that you can understand what's happening to you and you can be able to have a better way of getting through your classes regardless of how they are going. So that's for your kids. And then for you, that helps you getting through your day.
So this is something that I think will resonate with a lot of people, Rosalind. You say you don't have to have the perfect family schedule that you can post on Pinterest, because if you go to Pinterest, you can find some of these perfect schedules, and it's not realistic for so many of us.
You know, actually, I have to say, I think the routines on Pinterest are a goal. They're an aspiration. I think that, I mean, honestly, like, I don't know who has these perfect parenting situations. I mean, I certainly don't. I have 2 boys, and it's really, you know, it's hard. And so really the most important thing for a schedule is that these things, and I want you to sort of take a step back, which is what makes us happy, regardless of how difficult things are, is a sense of purpose, contributing to something bigger than ourselves, meaningful social connection, a thing to feel curious about that we're building towards, and a place to process and find peace. And so when we're thinking about our routine, I want you to think about that every morning when we wake up, and this would be for the case for everybody in your family, that you even just take 1 minute to process and find peace before you start your day. So you could have your child have like a cup of hot cocoa or something while you're having your coffee, just a minute so that we're peaceful before we start our day. And then our children are going to be in maybe 5 hours, 6 hours of online learning. And then what we think is about 90 minutes to 2 hours to reconnect with friends or do something creative online if they have no other options. And then the other part is that an hour before we go to bed, and this is for everybody in the household, an hour before we go to bed, we have absolutely no screens, because that just in general, those routines, that structure will give us some way to get through it and not have to think about how we perfectly did it and did the perfect activities, because that will just contribute to feeling like we're falling behind and we're not doing this well.
I'm going to roll these two together, Rosalind. Recognizing your child's friendships are essential to their mental health, and then just seeing that social media and technology, don't see it as just one thing, right?
Yeah, so I just said, you know, then my last answer was like, well, gosh, you know, it's like my kid's going to be online for like forever. So what do I do about that? So here's another way I want you to think about it. I'd like for you to separate social media and technology use into 3 buckets. One is meaningful social connection. So that's why it's so important for your child to be talking to their friends or maybe their aunts or uncles or cousins or grandparents just on FaceTime, maybe once in a while, like once a week, once every 2 weeks. So they're maintaining important connections. And guess what? With kids, actually multiplayer video games can be a really good way for them to maintain their connections as well, which I know, you know, read the book so that we can give you some, you know, some limitations on that. But at the base, what's most important is being able to really focus on affirming their friendships. And then the second is being able to be creative. And so kids really can create wonderful, wonderful things online. And as long as they're treating people with dignity, with worth, overall, that should be the family rule about social media, then you can combine dignity with creativity and they can do amazing things. What we want to do is to be really careful about consumption. And that means like scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through YouTube, you know, going through YouTube with all different kinds of videos, and then 3 hours later and you don't know where the time went. And that's for us and for our kids. We want to really minimize the amount of consumption that we're doing. So if we can focus on how important and affirm for your children how important friendships are for them, and so work with them to develop within that routine a way for them to maintain their friendships.
5 tips for distance learning. Rosalind Wiseman, thank you so much for being with us this morning and providing this advice. We definitely appreciate it. Good to see you. And And the distance learning playbook for parents is on sale now.
If you're looking for a thrilling drama about family, courage, and survival, Let Him Go is the film for you, with powerhouse duo Kevin Costner and Diane Lane teaming up on screen once again. The story begins with a couple dealing with the tragic loss of their son. They leave their ranch to rescue their little grandson from a dangerous family. When they realize that family has no intention to let the child go, things take a violent turn. Take a look.
This woman I married but can't figure. Doesn't believe there's any world but this one. Still believes a horse has got a soul somehow. That's the gal for me.
Aw, joining us right now, one of the stars of Let Him Go, Hollywood legend Kevin Costner. Good morning, Mr. Costner. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Sharon.
Good morning. Well, this film is so intense with so much suspense and drama. It takes you like to a place you didn't expect to go. Did you feel that way when you read the script?
Yeah. I always have that moment, you know, reading a script by myself, whether it's Field of Dreams or Dances, where I think, oh my God, when I'm done, I have a secret, you know, I have this secret, and then if I can just get it out, people are going to understand the same feelings I had. And I never read a script that had so much dread in it from the very beginning. And that doesn't mean you know where it's going to go. It just means you have a bad feeling about where this can go. And I think in American cinema, I think it's been too long where, you know, movies aren't completely honest with where they're going. And this movie, for as much as you don't want it to go to that place, goes there.
Yeah, and your character, George, isn't on board with visiting the Wee Boys, but you support your wife, Margaret. Talk to us about what's so believable about this relationship and the steps a man is willing to take for his woman, even if he thinks it will end up badly.
Well, women are powerful, you know, they're these kind of so charismatic, and when they're ethically and morally feel like they're in the right, there's almost no stopping women in a way, and they're fierce. And this is a man who's dealt with violence all his life, and he just has a bad feeling with this going. But when you love, you just can't stand the idea of her being out there. And he's kind of a quiet guy. He kind of goes with it, just grits his teeth. He knows it's wrong. And he knows that this is maybe going to a bad place. So it's a thriller with kind of a love story in it in its own weird way.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see how that dynamic played out in the film. I saw an interview where Diane Lane said it was a dream come true starring opposite you. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, there's like a handful of them, and there's not any more than that are at the top of the heap. And it's a hard thing to do, acting. And there's so many young women and people who do it, and you go, how does it boil down to 3 or 4 that are just kind of, you know, actors of their generation? And she's one of those. And so that's pretty high praise for her to say that to me. But I feel the same about her. I mean, you know, I knew I had a partner every day on the set. I knew she knew how to deal with it. I mean, you're still looking at Diane Lane, who's very glamorous, and yet she was willing to play this grandma that was kind of, you know, on fire, so to speak. And I don't know who wouldn't follow Diane Lane to want to protect her.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And the story is, it's deliberately slow, but then it builds steadily with this mounting tension and then this urgency. What do you think is going to draw the fans the most, and what will surprise them when they see this film?
Well, I think that's what people want in life, is to be surprised. You know, not something that's hiding around the corner surprise, but to come away, think the movie's going to be about one thing, it becomes about another, and it sits with you. And I think the best thing you can say about a movie is that above and beyond its opening weekend, that it's a movie that you're going to want to share with people going forward. And so, you know, Let Him Go lives now forever. And the hard work that we put in, you know, for me, movies like Field of Dreams and Dances and a lot of movies I pick, I want them to be forever movies. And I think Let Him Go sits right in that category.
Well, it was so nice to see you and Diane Lane team up once again. The chemistry between the two of you is undeniable. Thank you once again, Kevin Costner, for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Thanks.
And our thanks to Focus Features for Providing production assistance with today's interview, Let Him Go is already on demand and in theaters.
Welcome back. Well, a longtime viewer got scammed and lost her savings. She said that she wants you to know what happened so that you don't fall for the same trap. Fox 5 team's Dana Fowle is here with the car sale that was actually a ripoff. Dana.
Yeah, no kidding. I mean, Darlene Miller lost $1,000. That is a whole lot of money to her. Heck, that's a lot of money to me and you too, I am sure. She says she's embarrassed that she was taken, and I get that, but thank you to her. She wants to put a face on these types of crimes. That's why she reached out to the Fox 5 team.
I watch you 3 times a day, and I hear this all the time from the news. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is.
Yep, we do say that. And yes, it's true. But Darlene Miller was taken anyway, car shopping online. She responded to an ad for a vehicle on Facebook's marketplace, she told us.
Immediately, I received a phone call that I was a representative from eBay Motors calling me about my online request for a vehicle.
Let me say up front, every brand name she mentions, none is involved in this scam. It's a lure, names you trust to win your trust. In an email, an eBay representative wrote, "This is a scam that actually takes place off of eBay, but uses the eBay brand name in an attempt to instill trust in the transaction." The caller said the car was $1,000, but Ms. Miller was getting a $200 discount from accumulated rewards from so many eBay purchases over the years.
He stated that I know I had rewards coming. I let my guards down because he knew that I was an eBay shopper.
He guessed because the caller doesn't know her or really anything about her. Listen what Darlene Miller says the police told her when she reported losing $1,000 in this scheme.
We get 400 of these a month.
And that's a figure we've heard local police use before. Hundreds of similar scams reported every month. Listen to how it works. It starts with a story you want to believe.
Just said the seller was out of state because they were in the service and was about to be deployed. So they arrange everything between the seller and eBay, and then eBay and the buyer.
The scammer keeps things moving fast. Lock down the vehicle quickly to reserve it, he said, by getting gift cards from brand name retailers to pay for the vehicle, forgetting that eBay sales go through a secure escrow account.
I don't know why any red flags didn't go off when I was asked to go purchase gift cards.
Right.
I should have known then. He created urgency.
Right.
And I said, well, I will go on my lunch hour.
She did it, called him back, gave him the card numbers. While he was draining her cards of the cash, he was buying time with more details. The car is on its way, he told her. She was even sent this invoice that looks like it really came from eBay Motors. Again, it's not.
Give it 2 to 3 days to arrive, but I could drive it and keep it and have it checked out for 5 days to make sure my money is secure.
There are red flags everywhere, but this is the one that finally caught her attention. The system server crashed, he said. They only received half of her money.
So he needs me to go buy another $500 card.
She hung up. No car, savings gone, and a very hard lesson learned.
I just wanted to believe it and wanted it to be real, that I just let my guard down and just let all the red flags go out the window.
And that's what they're counting on. That's why they keep it moving so quickly. Now, after reporting this scam to the police and calling the gift card issuers to see if they could trace the money, they said they could not. The money's gone. The scammers got away with it. Elise?
You just hate to hear that, and you hate to see the toll that it's taking on her too. But this is really, it's a well-used scam, Dana, because it works.
Yeah, it absolutely does. Here was a woman, this was her COVID savings, money she put aside in case of an emergency because she was worried about the state of the conditions right now. And they talked her right out of it. The FTC, Federal Trade Commission, has warnings on its website about it. And a lot of these big names that are used as lures, they have warnings on their websites about it. But here's some advice. When you're making a big online purchase, take a deep breath. You do not have to be rushed through this process. If somebody's rushing you, be suspicious. And double check some of those choices with trusted friends around you because they might say, hey, don't pay for a car with a gift card.
So important to keep in mind. And gosh, I know she is hating that this happened to her, but so glad, Dana, that she was willing to share her story with you. Hopefully it'll help other people.
Yes, and thank you one more time to her for doing this.
For sure. All right, Dana, thanks so much. We appreciate it.
Well, as a member of the multi-platinum selling R&B group Escape, this next celebrity knows how to whip up a recipe for success. Latasha Scott made the transition to a plant-based diet in order to live a healthier lifestyle. And now she's sharing that journey with us with her self-published cookbook, Latasha's Planted Lifestyle, featuring mouth-watering plant-based recipes. And joining us right now, the lovely and talented Latasha Scott. Latasha, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. You made that sound so good. I was like, okay now.
Girl, it's easy to talk about what you guys have done and your success. Always, always. And it's a pleasure to be speaking with you this morning. So first, let's talk about why you made this transition to plant-based foods more than a decade ago.
I did. A lot of people know that being in a group, you know, the light is always shining on you. And in my way, it was the big girl of the group, you know, and I did not want that to become the title for me. Okay. I met my husband in '94, and he came into my life and he said, you know what, you can be affected by this, or you can be effective in producing better results. So we started to delve more into eating healthier. And I found out that less meat meant less fogginess in the head. I started to lose weight. And so that transition for me was something I definitely wanted to share with others. We went on tour in 2018, and there was so many people saying, Latasha, how did you lose the weight? You know, what's going on with you? Was it surgery? And I go, no, you guys, I actually took out meat from my diet and I exercised. And so I want this to be a journey for all of us. And that was my initial interest into this plant-based thing.
And you say that this book is beyond recipes. So when and why did you decide to actually write the cookbook and then include your journey as well?
Well, because I felt like music was my passion, I had to find another way to give back. You know, when you think about music and just the effect that we had on just the culture, I wanted to continue to maintain that. In order to do that, I had to make sure that I gave everyone else the same thing that I was getting. Eating better foods, coming up with recipes, and allowing myself to understand that my body is like soil. Whatever you plant, you reap. And so planting better things inside of your body is a lot more healthier, you know, so that's the reason.
Can you tell us about some of the recipes that we'll actually see in the book?
Yes. I have one of my favorites is asparagus fried rice. I've made that so many times. Spinach dip is another one of my favorite recipes. Because I don't use cheese in any of my dishes, people are like, oh my gosh, it tastes like, you know, like if I went to Houston's or any other big restaurant like that. So I have so many recipes, you guys. And a lot of this is attributed to, you know, just walking in life, just meeting different people, my family, being that helping me with my journey. So this book is a reflection of love.
Beautiful. And you know what, let's talk about Escape. And I mean, I could just talk about the songs and how your guys have actually brought, I mean, I used to just jam, and I still do, jam to the songs. But the group recently sang the national anthem at the Falcons game last Sunday. How was that experience? You killed it. It was amazing.
Thank you so much. That was exciting for us to get that phone call. We're the home team. You know, so they called us and we were like, yeah, we were up for it. And since that, everybody's just kind of hitting us online like, you guys are coming with new music. But that was the start for us to get back together and just grace everybody with the gifts. And we had a wonderful time.
We enjoyed it. We really did. And you guys have you have a busy schedule, upcoming new product lines, new music releases, a clothing line. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, Made Girls is an athleisure line that I created early on, my husband and I. And so it is just about being comfortable in your own skin. I think once you start eating better, you feel better about yourself, you just walk in a different light. And so I'm just here to empower. I'm here to walk in my purpose. And that's to let people know that, yes, there's possibility. You can feel good about yourself and be amazing and be great in whatever that you aspire to be.
Latasha, thank you so much for joining us. Continued success for you.
Thank you, Sharon.
Take care. And for more information on Latasha's self-published cookbook, Latasha's Planted Lifestyle, go to our website, fox5atlanta.com, and click the As Seen on TV tab.
So, Dr. Callender, we saw that the TMC is reporting about 27% of their ICU capacity is by COVID-19 patients. What does that mean? What are you seeing at the Memorial Hermann Health System?
We're a little below that particular level. We're at about 25% of our overall ICU capacity being filled with COVID-19 patients. The reason that's important is because the ICU beds are very precious resources. We tend to use all of them all the time for the sickest patients who come into our hospitals. So when those beds begin to fill up with COVID-19 patients, that means there are fewer beds available for the sickest of the sick. And so that means it's harder for those patients who typically would require that level of care to get it. So we're very concerned about the number of ICU beds that we have. And although we can add a few, it's not as easy to add ICU capacity as it is what we consider the normal, typical hospital medical surgical bed capacity.
And given the trajectory that we're on, I mean, I know we managed in July, but is what we're on right now, is it sustainable, or do people really need to start honing in, going out and doing those things?
Well, we certainly would like for people to use those behaviors that we recommend that stop the spread of the virus. So masking, watching our distance, washing our hands, avoiding aggregating in groups of a size greater than 10, certainly not doing that indoors, making sure that we're doing everything to stop spread. We don't know for certain that we'll be back where we were in the summer or even beyond, but we're concerned about what we're seeing in terms of the overall rise in the number of new cases. We don't believe we've seen the impact of the Thanksgiving holiday yet, and the Christmas and end of the year holidays are coming up on us quickly. So certainly there is a potential that surge peak could go even higher. Again, we hope to avoid that. The best way to do that, even with the vaccine coming, is to use mask and social distancing, all of those guidelines that we've recommended previously.
And what we saw in July, some people may think, well, we managed successfully, or, the hospitals managed successfully. Why should we care if it's not at that level yet?
Well, we don't want to be at that level. And again, as our ICUs and hospitals fill up with COVID-19 patients, that means that we're stretched, we're less able to provide the sort of care that others require when they're ill with something other than COVID-19. Puts a great deal of pressure on our health systems across the greater Houston area. It means, again, that people may suffer, and even if they can get to the hospital, we worry that they'll be able to get care as they did before. And some people will be fearful about coming to the hospital if they're full of COVID patients. So with all of those factors at play, and with a very negative impact on health possible, we want to do everything we can to stay out of those situations.
And last question for me. What does a surge in cases or hospitalizations, what does that mean for the staff? I was just talking to someone else who manages a critical care unit, and they said, the nurses and staff were exhausted. It's taken a big emotional toll. How are the doctors and medical staff at Memorial Hermann doing?
Well, they're certainly dedicated and committed, but we've been doing this for a while now. And not only do we have the strain of caring for a lot of very sick patients, we also are trying to care for their loved ones, their family members, provide support and encouragement for the patients and those who support them. And so it's just a big challenge, and it's wearing over the course of time. And so again, as we get worn down, we're less able to provide the sort of care that you and your loved ones would expect if you have to come into the hospital. So please help keep us out of that situation.
Got it. Anything else that you would like to mention?
Well, even though the vaccine is coming, it's going to be available only in limited supply. So let's think about using our mask and maintaining social distancing, all of these things that we recommend we do, probably for at least another 6 months or so. it will take us that long, at least, to get an ample supply of vaccine and be ready, perhaps, to move to a different sort of level of precaution.
Got it. All right. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Maria. Have a great day.
So here are some alarming numbers for you. The U.S. has now surpassed 15 million confirmed COVID-19 cases. That is a massive number. But the statistic that really hits home today is 1 in 22 Americans have tested positive for COVID-19 since the pandemic began. Almost 300 people have died. That's according to Johns Hopkins. If you take a look at this graphic now, it recorded its first case in the U.S. on January 21st. Then, 98 days later, the U.S. hit 1 million cases. That was on April 28th. Fast forward to December 8th, where we are now at 15 million cases. And joining me to weigh in on this and other issues is Dr. David Zeke with Northwestern Medicine. Good morning to you, Dr. Zeke.
Good morning.
Okay, I want to talk vaccines with you in just a minute, but first, everyone's waiting to see what kind of impact the Thanksgiving travel had on the increasing numbers. Are those showing up already, or do we have another week to go before we realize the impact, if any?
Typically, we say that about 14 days after any sort of event is when we can fully appreciate the impact that that event had on COVID cases. What's interesting here in Illinois is that we have not yet seen a spike. We're about 10 days in, so we might see an uptick soon. Now, we are seeing it elsewhere in the country, and people are having explosions and record numbers, but in Illinois, we are not. It reminds me a little bit of Memorial Day at the end of May. We had a holiday weekend that coincided with the easing of our quarantine restrictions and large public demonstrations. Every indication was we should see a large spike after that event, and we didn't. Same with Thanksgiving in Illinois. So far, we don't see a huge spike, which just goes to show you how difficult this virus is to predict.
Yeah, absolutely. The good news is, too, the positivity rate numbers have been going down. So that's hopefully something we can continue. In the meantime, as you know, yesterday, the UK became the world's first nation to begin vaccinating its citizens, but breaking overnight that during the process, there were 2 case reports of allergic reactions. And this is the first time this has been seen despite very extensive clinical trials of thousands of people. So the allergic reaction wasn't a feature in the clinical trials. Is this cause for concern, and does that mean other unknown issues may pop up during mass vaccinations?
This is not uncommon at all. Anytime you go from a trial of thousands of people vaccinated to millions of people vaccinated in the community, we are going to have more data and be able to tell more things about a vaccine. The particular thing you're talking about is severe allergic reactions. There are 2 nurses, they're healthcare providers, that suffered an anaphylactic reaction, which is a life-threatening allergy to the vaccine. Both of these individuals have had anaphylactic reactions to previous vaccines. So this was not out of the blue. It has caused Pfizer, though, to issue a warning. Anybody who has had anaphylaxis to a previous vaccine or even to a food, if you've been told you should take an EpiPen with you just in case you have one of these reactions, they are right now advising that you do not get this COVID vaccine until more data is available.
Oh, that's very important to know. Okay, here's another concern. Some trial participants who got the second shot from the Pfizer trials are now saying they experienced side effects, including headaches, fatigue, and one patient said his chills were so bad that after the second shot, he was shaking so hard he cracked a tooth. So when people hear things like this, that it then makes them question, do I really want to get this vaccine? What do you have to say to that?
These sorts of reactions are not uncommon after getting a vaccine. The whole purpose of a vaccine is to kick the immune system and activate it so that it can recognize the real thing when your body encounters it. Whenever the immune system is activated, you will have symptoms of a little bit of muscle aches, headache, sometimes chills and fever. And the more powerful the vaccine is, the greater the side effects can be. The majority of people will not experience side effects like that, but some people will. They usually last a day or two. The most important thing to know is if you're going to get the vaccine, don't plan something significant the very next day. No big talks, don't go away on vacation, because you've got to expect to feel a little bit punky after you get the shot. We always say, if you get a vaccine and feel nothing, then we actually worry that that vaccine didn't actually create an immune response in you. So these things are going to happen. They are uncommon to have such severe reactions, but expect to feel a little bit down for a day or two after getting it.
Okay, finally, what do you know about when the vaccine is going to be available to you and your other healthcare workers? And do you have any concerns yourself?
We expect that in the next week or two, the frontline workers are going to start getting vaccinated. Unfortunately, it is clear that with this first distribution, there are not nearly enough vaccines for all frontline workers. We hope that will take place by the end of January, that all of us will be vaccinated. I personally do not have any reservations about getting it. That's not to say you can't have the reactions we discussed, and there can be an occasional serious reaction with any vaccine. There's Guillain-Barré syndrome and transverse myelitis. But the incidence with, the common flu vaccine is about 1 to 2 in a million. Right now, high-risk individuals have a 1 to 2% chance in 100 of dying. So the risks of having a significant problem either getting the vaccine, getting the virus or transmitting the virus far outweighs the risks of getting the vaccine.
Okay, Dr. David Zeke with with Rush, thank you so much for joining us today. Always good to see you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
With the FDA set to make a decision anytime on 2 new COVID-19 vaccines, we all have a lot of questions about it. So for the next couple of weeks, Fox Medical Team's Beth Galvin will be answering your questions, and she joins us live. And Beth, we have a lot to get to, so let's go ahead and start. First up, we got a question in from Brian from Duluth, Beth, and he says that he's flying to the Philippines to get married in front of his fiance's family next month. His question, though, for you, is it possible to try to get a vaccination prior to going overseas in mid-January? What do you say?
So congratulations, Brian. I don't think it's going to be possible if you are a healthy adult male that you are going to be able to get that, vaccine in January. I think it's going to take a while. The initial vaccine, when it rolls out, it could roll out as soon as next week, is really going to go to those frontline healthcare workers, those folks who are in long-term care facilities and the staff in the hospitals. So I think they're going to get, they're going to be first in line. And then we're going to see people with different medical conditions, seniors, people with underlying health conditions are going to really go first. So I imagine probably if you're healthy, it could be maybe April or May before you'll be able to get your COVID-19 vaccine, unfortunately, Brian.
Okay, Beth, so we got another comment in, a question that is from Denise on Facebook. Denise writes, I have underlying health issues. How will I know when it's my turn to get the shot? And do they have to stick the needle so far in? I got the booster this year and it hurts. It's a valid question.
Yeah, that is a good question.